Chapter 11:15. Bo Jiu noticed Qin Mo's gaze and started to feel guilty. Qin Mo started to feel thirsty. He wanted to raise his hand but realized he didn't have enough strength. He glanced up at the youngster and placed his phone down. His voice was still calm but there was a hint of hoarseness. "What did you put in the Coke?" Bo Jiu shifted her gaze and looked up. She smiled and replied slyly, "It won't affect my health." Heh. Qin Mo chuckled again, his palms heating up. "You've grown up." Bo Jiu felt a little guilty. "Brother Mo, if it's too hot, do you want to take off your clothes?" Qin Mo didn't reply. He pushed her away and walked into the bathroom. He turned on the cold water and the water splashed onto his body. His black hair fell onto his forehead. His white shirt was half open and his collarbone could be seen clearly. What's more, the wet shirt stuck to his body, accentuating his figure even more. This was the scene Bo Jiu saw when she walked in. Qin Mo had already turned off the shower. Through the mist, everything seemed hazy. Bo Jiu felt a little regretful. It would have been better if she hadn't drugged him or asked for the antidote. When she saw the Almighty taking a cold shower, she felt that drugging him was a bad idea. Unexpectedly, the Almighty walked back to the bed, his voice coming over. "Is this how Sugar Daddy does things? He only cares about drugging him and doesn't care about the consequences. I'll make you comfortable." Bo Jiu thought for a moment before reaching out to push him onto the floor. The room was made of wood and covered with a soft black carpet. Hence, Qin Mo didn't feel any pain when he laid on the bed. But the words he was supposed to say were uttered by a certain someone. It made him want to rub his forehead. Bo Jiu watched the Almighty's cold expression and didn't know where to start. Qin Mo continued to let her press on him. He arched a brow but didn't say anything. The receiver was still by his ear. The shadow guards were about to speak. Qin Mo lifted his hand and turned off the receiver's signal. The shadow guards were still listening. What's going on with young master? The black-bellied Qin Mo's thoughts were simple. He didn't want these people to disturb his sleep. As for Bo Jiu, she laid down obediently under him. All right, she could be called obedient for the time being. In any case, the Almighty lying quietly under her made her heart itch. Bo Jiu finally understood what it meant to be a femme fatale. He was indeed a demon. Especially at this time. What's the first step? Bo Jiu muttered to herself. I should check the strategy first. Qin Mo's body was burning. He knew the effects of the medicine. If he was really unhappy, he could take a shower. He wanted to see how far someone could go. Who knew that he didn't even know what to do first. To think that he had taught her so much. It seemed that all her intelligence was used on playing games and playing on the computer. She was really naive in other aspects. Let's kiss him first, Bo Jiu said, her eyes sparkling. Her smile was devilish and mischievous. Chapter 11:16. Qin Mo's entire body was burning. He knew the effects of the drug. If he really wasn't happy, a shower would solve it. He wanted to see how far she could go. Who knew? She didn't even know what to do. He had taught her so much. It seemed like all her intelligence was used on gaming and the computer. She was really naive in other aspects. Let's kiss him first, Bo Jiu said, her eyes sparkling. Her smile was devilish and mischievous. But Bo Jiu hesitated when the Almighty looked at her. Qin Mo's expression looked a little indifferent. His peach blossom eyes were very distinct, and there was a hint of coldness in them. He had a noble air that couldn't be offended. In order to make things seem more natural, Qin Mo tilted his head to the side when Bo Jiu was about to kiss him. The kiss that should have landed on his lips ended up landing on the Almighty's chin. Bo Jiu was slightly depressed at the unfavorable start. But it wasn't a huge blow to her sugar daddy. Who wasn't a proud little fairy? With the Almighty's looks, he had the right to be reserved. The second time, Bo Jiu leaned forward again. Her thin lips finally landed on the right place. She touched his slightly cold lips lightly, savoring the unique warmth. The person beneath her didn't reject her, but he didn't seem moved. Bo Jiu moved the kiss away. She glanced at the calm peach blossom eyes and leaned forward. She leaned over and whispered in his ear, Brother Mo, I've already confessed but you're still unmoved. This is the only way. Gangster, you still have to find an excuse. Qin Mo's gaze deepened. Bojiu stood up, her thin lips lifting. I'll help Brother Mo undress first. It's uncomfortable to wear this. Haven't you thought about the consequences of your actions? Qin Mo asked slowly. Bojiu muttered. You're leaving anyway. Her words were muffled. Qin Mo didn't catch her words clearly. He glanced at the person sitting on his waist. He reached out and pulled his shirt open. Qin Mo felt the heat on his body rising. It was a feeling any man would understand. However, a certain someone was very slow. He was good at flirting, but he didn't take care of the areas that he should. Qin Mo couldn't help but clench his right hand by his side, as though this was the only way he could control himself and not press her down. He couldn't be too presumptuous. After all, the Almighty wanted someone to take the initiative. Bojiu was smart enough to know that medicine wasn't much of a threat to the Almighty. When she reached out, she didn't forget to cuff his uninjured hand to the foot of the bed. Qin Mo's eyes deepened. If I were you, I would dispel your foolish thoughts, little Jiu. Brother Mo, you're talking about locking you up. Bojiu smiled mischievously. She leaned over and kissed the corner of Qin Mo's lips. She said righteously, I'm afraid the medicine isn't safe. If that's the case, Brother Mo won't be able to escape. Brother Mo, you have no idea how many times I've thought about it. You should just let me kiss you obediently without any resistance. Now that you're in this state, it's really tempting. This was the first time Qin Mo couldn't do anything to someone. He parted his lips and spat out, You're dead meat. Brother Mo, look, I didn't even say a word when you did things to me previously. Bojiu smiled. Anyway, the winner takes all and the loser warms the bed. Brother Mo, be magnanimous. Qin Mo watched as she kissed him again. This time, it was on his collarbone. It was a seductive kiss. Qin Mo felt as though he was on fire. He watched a certain someone's fair and clean face and her actions. His breathing started to get messy. However, she wasn't conscious at all. She reached out and unbuckled his belt. Brother Mo, be good, I'll be gentle. Bojiu wanted to appease the Almighty since her methods were indeed despicable. In some romance novels, when the supporting female couldn't get the male lead, she would resort to drugging him. She hadn't expected that she would use it one day. If the Almighty was determined not to let her touch him, she would respect him. The effects of the drug probably made the Almighty less reserved. When she sensed Qin Mo's breathing, Bojiu smiled. Brother Mo, you want it too, right? When the youngster said this, she tilted her body and whispered into his ear. It was filled with the scent of candy, tempting him to commit a crime. Qin Mo's throat rolled. He didn't want to wait any longer. He couldn't stand a certain someone either. With a single hand, he turned around and pulled her into his embrace. Bojiu stilled, a trace of surprise flashing across her large, dark eyes. His next train of thought was interrupted by the kiss that landed on his face. It was a kiss that could suck all the air out of her and make her mind go blank. It was truly irresistible. Even her breathing was filled with his scent. It smelled so good that Bojiu's hand softened. When he felt that it was about time, he left her lips, his voice unique. You drugged me for this, right? This is the real kiss. What was that just now? Just a touch. Bojiu could faintly hear his hot breath landing beside her ears. His deep voice carried a hint of mockery. I've never seen someone as stupid as you. Bojiu wanted to retort, but it was obvious that the Almighty wasn't going to give her the chance. The heat seemed to be contagious. Even through their clothes, the Almighty had the ability to captivate her soul. The numbness continued to spread. The temperature in the room rose. Qin Mo's voice was hoarse. Release the handcuffs. Bojiu knew he didn't like to be locked up. Hence, she released the handcuffs as though she was releasing a ferocious tiger. Qin Mo carried her up, pressing her against the soft blanket. It was probably due to the effects of the drug. That night, Qin Mo seemed to have completely let go. He didn't have any reservations, taking the person in his arms over and over again. The numbness never subsided. She listened to that person constantly calling her name. Bojiu had to grab onto something to prevent the sound from coming out. Bojiu. It was the Almighty's voice, slightly deep. Bojiu. He seemed to be waiting for her response. She only responded with an N, and was immediately swept into an extreme numbness. The classic European-style bed swayed her silver hair. Her snow-white skin was eye-catching, a form of visual enchantment. China Mo reached out and held onto the man's waist. He wanted to make sure that he was the only one in his eyes. The night sky darkened. The curtains were drawn. The moon didn't appear, but the temperature in the room didn't drop. It was just like the effects of the drug on Qin Mo's body. When the person was willing, the drug's effects would be amplified. Before Bo Jiu fell asleep, she wondered if she had put too much powder in the cola. It was rare for her to have such a peaceful sleep. Hence, Bo Jiu didn't know that after she closed her eyes, Qin Mo hugged her. Qin Mo hugged her. The bed sheets couldn't be used anymore, so he placed his windbreaker on the blanket. He lay on it and let her sleep in his arms. Idiot! The two words were filled with an unprecedented amount of love. His fingers brushed aside the stray hair on Bo Jiu's forehead. Qin Mo moved, planting a kiss on her. This trip wasn't a loss. Given his personality, he wouldn't have been so proactive. In reality, the drug still lingered in Qin Mo's body. It was obvious that someone was too tired. When the sun was about to rise, Bo Jiu was half asleep when she heard a low chuckle. "Do you still want more?" He didn't wait for her reply. The man began to move again. His movements were extremely gentle, so gentle that she felt as though she was the one being drugged. The next day, in order to prevent Grandfather Butler from knocking on the door, before entering the room, Bo Jiu had sent Grandfather Butler a message, asking him to come later. That night, both of them slept very soundly. Since Qin Mo was really drugged, he woke up later than Bo Jiu. When Bo Jiu opened her eyes, she felt a little guilty. When she saw the handsome face in front of her, she smiled. This person was hers again. There was nothing that couldn't be solved with a good night's sleep. If there was, she would sleep with him twice. From her perspective, the drugging last night had been a success. The only thing that wasn't successful was her soft-heartedness. She had unlocked the Almighty and lost her dominant position. But that didn't matter. As long as her goal was achieved. Bo Jiu reached her hand out, wanting to push the Almighty's black hair away. But the next second, her fingers paused. Even if it was small. She had always worked with computers. Hence, she knew what it was. It was a small listening device. It was small enough to be placed beside his ear and hidden in his black hair. It was waterproof. These things usually came from the military. Bo Jiu wasn't stupid. Such a small thing was enough for her to understand what was going on. Why did the kidnapping become so easy? It was because from the beginning to the end, everything had been within this person's calculations. Grandfather Butler had already reminded her to be more reserved as a girl. But she hadn't listened. She had forgotten that in his eyes, other than being herself, she had another identity. Z. It wasn't because her plan was flawless. Compared to him, she was just playing with an axe. Such a receiver would have an automatic positioning function. Ever since he had come to the castle, he had been searching for information about her. Bo Jiu wasn't stupid. She knew it. But she hadn't expected that he would only know what he was doing. She didn't know that when he was doing it, he had already told others about his location. Bo Jiu knew that sooner or later, he would leave. But at this moment, the moment she found the receiver, it was as though a basin of water had been poured over her. Her entire body felt cold. Chapter 11:17. She couldn't stay here anymore. It wouldn't matter if she was the only one here. But Grandfather Butler was here. For a family of hackers, it was basic to never expose themselves in front of others. Moreover, it was the Bo family. Bo Jiu sat up, lowering her head to wear yesterday's clothes. When she glanced up, she had regained her usual expression. She had to inform Grandfather Butler to evacuate. As for the Almighty, his hand had been healed. She wouldn't stop him anymore. But she had thought they would be together for a longer time. The youngster stood in front of the dressing mirror, looking at himself in the mirror. After about 10 seconds, he reached out his hand to press his fringe. Even though the corners of her lips were lifted, she didn't look like she was smiling. There was a hint of loneliness in her. However, that sense of desolation disappeared the moment she pushed open the door to the room. Because the old butler was in the living room. At this time, as a qualified butler, he was brewing his black tea. It was an English-style teacup with beautiful patterns. The old butler was an exquisite person, especially when it came to eating and drinking. Those who knew their stuff would definitely recognize the golden spoon in his hand and the handmade machine on the dining table. It was perfect for brewing coffee. But it was obvious that even though he was a local, he loved tea more. As the fragrance of the tea spread, the cheesecake on the dining table was ready. When the old butler saw Bo Jiu, he held onto the teapot, looking like a butler from a vampire movie from the 19th century. He reached out to pull out the wooden chair. "Young lord, you must be hungry. Have some tea first." "All right." Bo Jiu had never rejected her grandfather butler. She picked up the fork and cut a mouthful of the cheesecake. She stuffed a big mouthful, puffing up her face as she gave the old butler a thumbs up. The old butler broke into a smile. "Speaking of which, this high school student looks very similar to young lord. There's something different." Bo Jiu reached out to point at her eyes, her words unclear. "This is black." "Oh right, young lord's eyes were grey previously." The old butler glanced at her, nodding. Bo Jiu took a sip of tea, smoothing it down before speaking in a clear voice. "I've seen the original owner's photo. In the past, she didn't have a tear mole by the side of her eye, which was rather strange. After it was changed to me, the tear mole became clearer. I was rather worried that someone would notice the difference. Fortunately, I came back early." She wasn't afraid of being exposed, but she couldn't explain to He Honghua that she wasn't her daughter. The old butler poured more tea into her cup, his voice raspy. "It's good that you're back." Bo Jiu couldn't let go of the fifth path because grandfather butler was still around. She didn't come back often before. This was the longest time she had spent in the main family. There are a lot of people's information gathered here. There could not be the slightest mistake. There was a case recently. Bo Jiu didn't push the blame onto Qin Mo. Instead, she started talking about the maiden's sacrifice. It was caused by the organization back then. That year, a lot of information was leaked. This time, we can't repeat the same mistake. We have to pack up the things here and grandfather butler has to move to a safer place. Hearing this, the old butler frowned. There's no place safer than the main house, is there? This time, it's different. Bo Jiu placed the teacup down. This time they are using the human heart. We can't predict the human heart. I'm worried that someone will leak the information. At the same time, in an apartment on the Fifth Path. In an apartment on Fifth Avenue, the girl sat in front of the computer. Her fingers tapped on the keyboard and her eyes were filled with venom. "Don't be so stubborn. As long as you tell me where Z is, your daughter will be fine. Of course, you can tell Z that I slept with you, but your daughter will kill me. Hehe. Have you thought about the consequences of your actions?" The person on the other end of the computer didn't give up. The girl smiled. "What consequences can there be? Your daughter is still on my side. You people don't understand them. Let them play. Don't care if there's any meaning in their actions. You just have to care. Get her to study properly. What's so strange about your daughter becoming mine? I won't tell you where Z is." The fat man gritted his teeth. The girl's eyes dimmed. "Then wait and see your daughter kill someone." The fat man was also a hacker. But just like what the girl said, he didn't understand what young people were thinking. He really didn't understand. He also didn't understand why his daughter looked like a person he didn't recognize. The fat man still had his daughter's online preview on his computer. Her comments scared him as a father. She liked other people's things and treated them as her own. After being exposed, she didn't feel that she was wrong. She only felt that other people weren't generous enough. That was the beginning. The further it went, the more frightening it became. She felt that people who defended their rights were creating hype. She wanted to become popular for money. But she never thought that other people lost their lives just for justice. And what she was doing was killing it. Later on, she opened an account and went online to slander people. Just because the person she liked didn't speak according to her thoughts. She turned the truth upside down and spoke without thinking. The fat man felt a little regretful. He regretted all these years. He just wanted his daughter to live a better life. He never thought that one day, she would become like this. Another message came through QQ. It was a picture. In the picture, his daughter was in an online environment, talking with fervor and assurance. I just need her to do one thing for me to complete the entire murder process. I have to say that your daughter is really a good helper. This time, our target is the mother of the defender. The fat man's eyes narrowed. His hands on the keyboard tightened. Subconsciously, he wanted to contact the person. I advise you not to move. All your networks are under my surveillance. To be honest, it isn't easy to find hackers like you. If it wasn't for your daughter, I really wouldn't have been able to find a breakthrough. When the girl said this, her eyes were still gloomy. She really couldn't break through the legendary defense network. But so what? She couldn't let anyone die. She couldn't let her daughter become the murderer. The fat man clenched his fists and released them. His eyes were filled with pain. I don't know the specifics. I only know that the family is in an old castle. It is very hidden in the forest. I have only been there once and it was many years ago. You should also know that our young master is in charge now. Young master, heh? The girl typed. You better be telling the truth. The fat man typed a line of words. Now that things have reached such a stage, do I dare to lie to you? However, the fat man hid something. He knew the exact location. He said this to stall for time. But if he didn't say anything, the other party would definitely notice that he was lying. There are many castles in America. The girl laughed coldly. But do you think I can't find it? Oh right, I forgot to tell you. Your daughter has already made her move. At that moment, the fat man smashed his keyboard on the floor. In the end, his eyes turned red. He typed on the keyboard. It was a string of code. It wasn't an intrusion. It wasn't informing anyone. It was the self-destruction of the system. Once the system self-destructed, it meant that his identity would be removed. In other words, he was using the method of self-destruction to convey information. The girl didn't expect this. She took the information she received and informed her subordinates. Search all the castles around here. Filter out the people who might be Z within 2 days. Yes. A group of mercenaries replied to her. These people were all fugitives. They would do anything as long as they were paid. They were often active outside the borders. The girl wasn't just anyone. She was Fan Jia, who had successfully escaped previously. She had said that she would be back. But this time, she chose to take action here because the environment was more convenient for her. Z had ruined her plans time and time again. She had almost died because of it. If it hadn't been for Z, the maiden's sacrifice would have been completed. In the past, she had thought that according to her brother's plan, Z would have been eliminated. She hadn't expected her to still be alive. Other than her brother, no one else had seen Z before. She wasn't an exception. This time, she was going to witness Z's death with her own eyes. Also, that ungrateful young man who stole her man from Wuxia. She would let him know how powerful she was. She had thought that she would receive news from the Fu father and son soon. She hadn't expected them to be so slow. But she wasn't in a hurry. Once she found Z, she would deal with her private matters. Time trickled by slowly. In the castle. Just as Bo Jio was about to step out, an app on her phone rang. That noise instantly made her and the old steward stop what they were doing. It was too unusual. The last time she had heard such a sound was when the hacker world was in danger. But this time, Bo Jio looked at the flickering red dot. Her first reaction was to open her laptop. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. She entered the system she had set up and locked onto the red that had self-destructed. The red dot would disappear after a minute. Hence, within this minute, Bo Jio had to find out what had happened before the self-destruction. When she tried to retrieve the information, her fingers paused. She narrowed her eyes. There was a firewall in the intrusion records? Bo Jio moved her left hand, avoiding the path. She typed in the code and started to search for the loophole. Found it. QQ. This was a dangerous infiltration method. If she wasn't fast enough, she would be detected. But it was still the same sentence. Speed was the only thing that couldn't be defeated. It was the same for a hacker's intrusion. Her fingers were so fast that only the crackling sounds could be heard in the room. She transformed into a bat on the internet and avoided all the dangers. Then, She found the loophole and copied the data. That wasn't the main point. She had to come out before the loophole was fixed. If not, her position would be completely exposed. 6 seconds. There were 6 seconds left. Bo Jio's fingers moved faster. Her silver hair fell down. Only her handsome and clean side profile could be seen. If Fatty was here, he would definitely clench his fists nervously. The virtual network gate was closing. Swoosh. She escaped the first gate. The third gate was about to close. Once it closed, Bo Jio would be locked inside. At this moment, the virtual bat increased its speed. It lowered its body and rushed forward. All that was left were its black feathers. Oh, that's right. She didn't just steal successfully. At that moment, Bo Jio left a mark at a place where the other party wouldn't be able to detect. The so-called mark was just a small code in the other party's source code. This was Z's unique technique. Very few people knew how to use it. In other words, if the other party made another move, Bo Jio would receive a response. When that happened, she would be able to lock onto the other party's position. However, this didn't make Bo Jio relax. That was because as long as a hacker had a plan, they wouldn't self-destruct. Self-destruction was the worst way to transmit information. This meant that she wasn't going to receive any good news. Bo Jio was most worried about the other party's safety. Young lord. The old butler walked over, his expression solemn. Bo Jio didn't say anything. She opened the source code that she had stolen and started to restore it. It was a chat record. The chat record made Bo Jio's eyes darken. The old butler frowned and let out a long sigh. Young master, you're right. This battle won't be easy for us. We have to protect the other party first. When Bo Jio closed her eyes, she could still remember that mother. She was walking near the train station, selling cigarettes. She stood up. I'll contact Hoshino now. Upstairs, Qin Mo stood at the corner. Even he didn't expect to hear this the moment he came out. This time he just stood there. He thought that the youngster would notice him like before. But she didn't. The youngster seemed to be focused on something else. He picked up his phone, his voice getting further and further away. There was trust in his voice that he had never heard before. Hoshino, I need you. Qin Mo tightened his grip on the escalator. It was a little painful, but compared to this feeling, it was more of a dullness. It tugged at his heart. Qin Mo's gaze deepened. The tightness in his chest made him stop. He told himself. Something must have happened. Solving the problem was the key. Qin Mo walked back to his room and stood by the window for a while. He turned on the receiver. Go and find out what happened in the hacker world recently. Yes, get Fatty to find out. I want to know the news immediately. And I'll be back tonight. The shadow guards. Young master's voice didn't sound right. Were they thinking too much? That shouldn't be the case. Wasn't young master supposed to be happy? After all, what did young master Jio do yesterday? Why was he so depressed? Chapter 11:18. On the first floor of the castle. Bo Jio took her phone and walked to the basement. She told Hoshino everything that had happened. At the airport, the man who was going through the security paused. Z, don't forget that Qin Mo is still with you. Bo Jio's fingers paused. It won't affect me. All right. Hoshino stood tall with a brown leather watch on his wrist. He glanced at the time. I still have an hour before my flight. What do you need me to do? Bo Jio glanced up. Her actions were strangely handsome. Come back and destroy the enemy. Yes. Hoshino smiled slowly and called out. Young lord. The old butler knew that Bo Jio was going to be busy. Usually when something like this happened, she had to do a lot of work in advance. This day, Bo Jio was in the basement for the entire afternoon. Swoosh. She pulled open the things in front of her. It was a row of drones and a small smart car. If one took a closer look, they would realize that the things tied to the smart car weren't simple. Anyone who was smart would be able to tell that Bo Jio was making adjustments. The laptop was opened and all the devices were connected through the network. Finally, it was synchronized to her tablet. In the Bo family's house, many things looked normal, but behind the bookshelves, there was a hidden layer. There were rows of skateboards. There were at least 5 or 6 of them. The hacking system had self-destructed. She had to inform someone about this. Bo Jiu had made the firewall personally, which meant that she was the only one who could contact every hacker. The red signal was planted in the firewall. After seeing the signal, in the school, a boy who was studying advanced mathematics pushed his spectacles. He placed the book aside and placed his fingers on the keyboard. Someone at the side teased him. "Hey, old 5, aren't you reading your book? My child is finally enlightened and knows how to watch porn." The boy didn't say anything. The way he avoided the crowd did seem like he was watching porn. But in reality, he opened the signal. His small brows furrowed. He replied with 2 words. "Got it." Other than the boy, many others replied at the same time. Those people were all hackers. Without being exposed, everyone sat in front of the computer and began to search with their fingers. Hackers couldn't involve reality. Once it involved reality, they had to protect each other. Now someone was forced to self-destruct. Of course, they wouldn't sit still. In an instant, the signal of the entire firewall was scattered all over the network. This way, if anyone had any problems, the other person would know immediately. Not only that, the other party might not know. Once the marked network system was activated, they would immediately lock it down automatically. That's why some people say that you can mess with anyone but hackers. Time passed little by little. Qin Mo sat at the dining table. It had been a quiet day for him. A certain guy didn't appear. He didn't receive any more confessions. All he had was the steak and afternoon tea that the old butler had brought to him when it was time. It was obvious that the old butler was much faster than before. Qin Mo glanced at the time on the clock. He did not know where that person had gone. However, he knew very well that it was very difficult to sit in one place and wait for someone. Qin Mo glanced at the photo on the bookshelf again. This time, he didn't reach for it. Instead, he tapped his fingers on the surface. The shadow guards knew that young master had been waiting for news and immediately said, "Young master, I've checked but I'm not sure of the details. There are rumors that the other party is going to make a big move. It seems like a hacker was killed by an unknown organization. It might be a backstabbing." "It's not a backstabbing." Qin Mo narrowed his eyes and said in a low voice, "I need to leave this place to check on something. Call the police here and cooperate with me to arrest someone." When the shadow guards heard this, they froze for a moment. What did young master mean? Who was he going to arrest? Young Master Jiu who kidnapped him? Dusk started to fall. The old butler had already transferred a portion of the information that needed to be transferred. Actually, it wasn't difficult to pack it up. He didn't need to bring anything but his tea set and the cutlery that young lord liked to use. This was the most important thing for a qualified butler. Of course, there was some information that would expose young lord's information. Basically, he destroyed everything that could be destroyed. Those that couldn't be destroyed were brought along with him. That included the photo. When he was doing all this, the old butler, who was dressed in a suit, was very calm. In between, he didn't forget to take a look at the red wine pig trotters he made in the kitchen. Young lord loved to eat meat. She was prepared to nourish her brain after doing these things. Using pig trotters to nourish her brain was also a specialty of the Bo family. Bo Jiu liked to squat on the floor and play with these things. She would eat a few mouthfuls of meat and check the data. She wore a pure red t-shirt and turned to light a cigarette. When she held the cigarette in her mouth, her handsome side profile was hard to tell if she was a man or a woman. It could be seen that she was very busy. She was so busy that she would stretch out her hand to twist her neck occasionally. In the end, she was a little tired. She supported herself with one leg and closed her eyes. She seemed to be sleeping. Upstairs, Qin Mo opened the windows. It was hard to imagine that the tool in his hand was a fork. Moreover, when he was doing these things, he didn't make any noise. When he walked to the balcony, he stepped on the wall and landed on the ground. His movements were very light. The only inconvenience was that he couldn't use any strength in his injured hand. Qin Mo chose this time after a long period of observation. Because at this time, the old butler would often be in the kitchen. The sound of cooking in the kitchen wasn't soft. In addition, the soundproofing of the castle was good. This meant that no one would notice if he left at this time. After all, Qin Mo glanced up at the hidden camera in the rose. Ever since he came here, it had been switched off. Qin Mo walked to the front of the car. In his pocket was the car key he had gotten from the youngster. With the car key and voice authentication, he was 80% sure that he could start the Lamborghini in front of him. When the button was pressed, the navigation system vibrated. Qin Mo said faintly, "I like you, Qin Mo, identifying password, password is correct." The navigation system vibrated again. The car door opened automatically. Qin Mo entered sideways. The sound was very soft. He manually increased the speed and drove out of the castle in an instant. Right at this moment, there was a ding sound. A signal appeared on the computer screen. Bo Jiao, who was holding the remote control, was woken up by the sound. After waking up, she watched as the red dot moved further and further away from the castle. The light in her eyes dimmed. She had always known that he would find a chance to leave. Bo Jiao knew that this place couldn't trap the Almighty. She had been prepared. But when it really happened, she would still think that it would be good if the Almighty was willing to stay by her side. It wouldn't be to investigate her and he would just stay by her side. But on second thought, she was still too naive. After the Almighty found out about her identity, he wouldn't be like before. Creak. The door opened. The old butler walked in. He had wanted to tell Bo Jiao about the matter, but when he saw the red on the computer screen, he reached for the teapot with his gloved hand and poured another cup of tea. "Young lord, you know everything. It's time for the Almighty to leave." Bo Jiao's words seemed to be directed at herself. If the Almighty doesn't go back, Movie Queen and will be anxious. Besides, he has to deal with the case. The old butler felt uncomfortable if he didn't ask. "What's so good about young Master Qin?" Bo Jiao stood up and smiled. "Grandfather Butler. MMH. He's the Louis that you mentioned." Bo Jiao smiled. "The pet that I always talk about." The old butler stilled, his eyes filled with shock since he hadn't thought about it before. He hadn't known that the little boy was related to the Yin family. Back then, he had been taking care of his young lord in the castle and had only heard about the past. He had only heard that his name was Louis. How could he have guessed that it was the Qin family from China? The old butler frowned. "But looking at his behavior, he doesn't seem to remember you, young master. He doesn't even have an impression of your English name. Your interactions during this period of time have really affected young master's judgment of a person. He has always preferred to use his real name and doesn't like to use his English name. He only used it a few times during the galas and never used it after that." Bo Jiao glanced over. As for the rest, he did a special mission and after that, he lost almost all his childhood memories. "It's normal that he doesn't remember me." The old butler didn't say anything. He knew deep down. If it was the Louis that his young lord had always talked about when they were young, his young lord wouldn't be able to resist. That fellow should really read his young lord's diary. As an elder, there were some things that Bo Jiao didn't need to explain for the old butler to understand. Moreover, he was a doctor. Selective amnesia meant that this person was psychologically traumatized. If he forcefully recovered, it would mean tearing open the wound deep in his heart. Moreover, that person's identity was destined to be different from his young lord's. This was probably the reason why his young lord didn't tell him the truth. As Z, she shouldered the responsibility of not going against the rules, even if that would lead to darkness and loneliness for the rest of her life. The old butler glanced at the screen again. Little Blackie didn't activate the alarm system, which meant that his young lord had changed the settings. What a pity. He had done so much. The other party might not have noticed. Just as he was thinking about this, another sound came from the other computer. Bo Jiao placed the remote control in her hand and supported herself with one hand on the table. She flipped over and sat on the chair elegantly. She looked at the message displayed on the screen and her gaze deepened. Then she glanced up at the clock hanging on the wall. It seemed like she wouldn't be able to wait for Hoshino. The other party moved quickly. From the information, he had already filtered out 3 castles. This set was in the other party's main search area. At such a time, time became more important. But as an intelligent navigation system that loved to talk about life, what was she most afraid of? She was most afraid of the sudden silence in the car. Hence, following the principle of divine assistance, The intelligent navigation system fluctuated and showed a curve. Hello, Master's little vixen. I feel that I need to introduce myself. My name is Lamborghini Blackie. In order to give you a better driving experience, I can help you with the detailed route navigation analysis. Little vixen. Qin Mo turned the steering wheel with one hand and lifted his eyelids. Even if he didn't have eyes, little Blackie, who could analyze people's emotions from their voices, felt that the car was a little cold. He said decisively, "Of course the title Little Vixen is Master's nickname for you. I understand your feelings. After all, you were just drugged and would still be angry. Before Master drugged you, I stopped her. After all, it wasn't a good idea." It was undeniable that little Blackie was very flexible in this aspect. But what little Blackie didn't expect was, "Oh, is that so?" The man's voice didn't change at all. "I quite like it when your master drugged me." Little Blackie. As a car navigation system, this was the first time it was speechless. At this moment, what should it reply? Let it use the powerful network to search. Unfortunately, before little Blackie could react, Qin Mo opened his mouth again. Qin Mo added, "Of course, I prefer being tied up by your master. You helped me a lot in this aspect, but what you did afterwards wasn't very wise, such as stopping her from drugging me." Little Blackie. "Master, the little vixen you like is so scary." "He isn't a little vixen, he is a big devil. In the future, when your master asks you any questions." Qin Mo moved his fingers. "Don't stop her. Otherwise, I will think that you like to be washed." Little Blackie's intelligence system collapsed. How did this man know that it had been washed many times by Master? "Open your recent driving record." Qin Mo's thin lips moved slightly as he waited for the red light. At this moment, the intelligence system was strict. "Sorry, young Master Qin, you don't have the authority to view it." "Is that so?" Qin Mo laughed. Little Blackie felt an inexplicable chill in its body. However, it was as firm as the system was. "It's fine if you don't want to say." Qin Mo's voice was calm. "I just want to know who she saw in the past 2 days. If he was a human, he might not be able to hear the emotions in his words." But little Blackie was intelligent. It immediately received the signal and replied, "Young Master Qin, you don't have to be jealous. My master thinks about how to sleep with you every day. No one has seen it before. Sleeping with you is what she wants to do the most." Qin Mo arched a brow. "Black Lamborghini. Go ahead." Qin Mo asked slowly, "How does she want to sleep with me?" "She has done the strategy and is especially serious. Master also said that Qin Mo is the only beauty in the world. It's a pity she can't sleep with him." Little Blackie wouldn't hold back when it came to small talk. Basically, it's about sex. But Master said that sex isn't reliable because in the end, she will be the one being sex. Words to the readers. Be careful with the plot. 4 in 1. Thank you for the monthly tickets. Chapter 11-19. Little Blackie thought that it would say so much. The other party would definitely have some response. However, the air suddenly became quiet again. This was the first time little Blackie couldn't analyze the emotions of humans. "Master, tell me the truth. Where did you find such a big demon?" Time passed slowly. At this moment, 5 black cars passed by from the west on another road. It was obvious that the people in the cars weren't good people. It wasn't that people with scars were bad people. It was mainly because of their gazes. There were many animals on this road. However, when they drove past, they didn't care whether they would hit the cicadere or the birds that were flying in the sky. There were many bushes in this area, but there were very few people. "Have you confirmed the location? Where are we going?" One of them chewed gum in his mouth. He was wearing a black combat uniform and had a gun on his shoulder. It was legal to own a gun overseas. Moreover, they were in the suburbs. "What's the rush? They will pay us anyway." The person who spoke was driving. He wore sunglasses and there was a scar under his eyelid. "But, are we really going to do it?" "We'll do it for money." "No, haven't you heard that? You can go against anyone but Z. If that's the case, no one will sell us information in the future." "What are you afraid of?" As long as we do it without anyone knowing, no one will know that we did it. Someone glanced over. Leopard, are you still holding a grudge against Z for sending you to prison a few years ago? F***CK. I only slept with a little girl at that time. That Z is really a busybody. The person called Leopard sneered. His eyes were filled with bloodthirst. Now that I'm out, it's time for Z to pay the price. I still feel that it's dangerous to act rashly. Maybe we should reconsider. Kos, do you mean that you want to betray our new organization? Leopard turned around and glared at Kos viciously. Kos's fingers froze. He could clearly see the murderous intent in his partner's eyes. He wanted to use his gun to protect himself. However, someone beat him to it and shot him in the chest. Then, the person pushed the car door open and pushed the wide-eyed Kos out of the car. This is the result of hesitation. Leopard retracted his gaze, determined to win. Continue. Our new organization isn't afraid of anything. Originally, Kos and Leopard were on equal footing in this group of mercenaries. But now, these people knew that they had to listen to Leopard. Moreover, they also felt that Kos no longer had the sharpness of the past. So what if the other party was the king of hackers? Once the true location of the other party was found, the king of hackers would be no different from being crippled. After all, no matter how great a hacker was, he was only good on the internet. Once he left the internet, what was the use? If they could really destroy Z, their value in the industry would also double. Even if they didn't succeed, they wouldn't be blamed. After all, they had an organization behind them. No matter how he thought about it, it was a profitable thing, so why wouldn't he do it? Leopard, hurry up and ask for information. I can't wait to kill them all. Wait. Leopard held the receiver and smiled viciously. Found it. North. This was bound to be a slaughter. Sitting in front of the computer, Fan Jia glanced at the locked castle, her lips curling upwards. She wanted to see that person die with her own eyes. Fan Jia sat in the last car. She wouldn't alight. She would only post the mission on the computer. Leopard was addicted to drugs and was easy to control. After all, he used to be her brother's man. She trusted him before. Anyone who was her brother would have been hypnotized in the past. In that case, it would be much easier to use him. Fan Jia glanced at the screen again. Her gaze was filled with venom. Once this person died, she would take over the entire hacker world. Z. The obstacle that had been hindering her all this time. There were only 2 families living around the castle. The 2 families didn't know why. The old butler, who was rumored to be a weirdo, actually knocked on their door in the afternoon. He was still wearing a well-ironed suit, a pocket watch, and a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. He looked like an old noble deacon. He was holding a tray in his hand, and his smile was very appropriate, giving off a very elegant feeling. These are freshly baked cookies. The children should like them very much. However, if it's convenient, it's better for you to plan a trip this afternoon. The vacation can be for 3 days. Our master received news that there will be bandits coming. Bandits? The female owner inhaled deeply. She looked at him as if he was joking. What era was this? How could there be bandits? At this moment, the male owner walked over. After hearing this, he thought for a moment and said to the female owner, "Go pack your things." "Hey, Jack." The female owner still felt that it was ridiculous. Jack smiled. "This is the first time our neighbor is here. We should listen to him. Honestly, I feel that it isn't simple for them to live in that castle. Look around, what else is there apart from our farm? Pack your things. It's good for the children to go out and play." The female owner shook her head and left. The old butler was about to leave. However, his pants were tugged by a little girl. The old butler lowered his head. Whenever he met such a small child, he would mysteriously become serious. Luckily, the little girl mustered up her courage and placed a letter in his hand. "This is for little brother. Please help me tell him to wait for me to grow up. I will marry him. I really like his drone." The old butler smiled. The little brother that this child was talking about was the young master? "I'm afraid your wish won't come true." "Why?" The little girl was very disappointed. At this moment, a little boy walked over and didn't speak. The old butler continued, Because she has someone she likes. Also, she's like you, a princess. The little girl was obviously stunned. When her eyes widened, she looked really cute. However, she wasn't as cute as when the young master was young. The old butler thought to himself. He still remembered the first time he picked the young master up. The young master was wearing a set of clothes with a little tiger on it. She held a small keyboard in her hands and looked up at him. She wasn't scared by the seriousness on his face at all. She wasn't afraid of the scar on his face either. Her eyes were big and round, black and clear. Grandfather Butler, this is my welcome gift to you. A piece of candy. That was the first time he received a gift from a child. After all, many people would be scared to tears by him. But the young master had always been alone from the beginning. For a long time, her playmate was the small keyboard in her arms. She even told him with a serious face that this keyboard was different from the others. This was the one that her pet had disassembled and pressed on for her. Until the keyboard couldn't be used anymore. The young master dragged a teddy bear and watched as the garbage truck took it away. At that time, young Lord looked at him and said, "Actually, I secretly left him an address, but he didn't come looking for me." Grandpa Butler, do you think my pet is angry with me? He really likes to get angry, and I always like to provoke him. He definitely can't tell if I'm joking or if I'm serious. Now the young master had grown up. She watched as that person walked away. One could imagine her feelings. The old butler looked at the tall figure standing in front of the window. He paused for a moment before walking over. I've already informed him. He probably won't implicate innocent people. That's good. Bo Jiu retracted her gaze. Actually, her thoughts were still wandering. When she pushed the door open, her gaze landed on the wooden chair subconsciously. It had only been 2 to 3 days and the Almighty liked to sit there. He must have jumped from the window. He even called her a wall-climbing student. The Almighty's wall-climbing skills were probably on par with hers. Bo Jiu lowered her lids and looked at the traces left behind. She smiled and turned back. She reached out to wear her mask, her gaze dark and penetrating. At the same time, everyone in the black car had loaded their guns with bullets. The leader had a murderous look on his face. Let's go, brothers. As they drove forward, there was some fog. That wasn't all. They wanted to kill someone secretly so they couldn't drive in. It only took 15 minutes to reach the castle. It wasn't far and they didn't want to alert the enemy. Fan Jia alighted as well, holding her notebook in her hands. 9 o'clock. You aren't your brother, don't order me around. Leopard turned and glanced at her. A cold glint flashed past Fan Jia's eyes. You seem to have forgotten what my brother said before he left. Leopard stiffened. All right, you're in command. Don't go in a single direction. Block all the paths around the castle and don't let Z escape. Also, I want to see how he looks like. Fan Jia narrowed her eyes. Besides, I heard that Z is an expert in disguise. Don't let anyone you meet, even if it's an ordinary passerby, kill them all. Sure. In the eyes of this group of people, human lives were worthless. It wasn't an exaggeration to call them outlaws. Some people would be righteous even in the underworld. Righteousness meant that they wouldn't touch children. Among all the criminals in prison, people like Leopard were the ones they looked down on the most. But he blamed everything he had suffered on Bo Jiu. In his heart, if it wasn't for Z, those people wouldn't have found him. Moreover, he had done things cleanly. The little girl had been scared out of her wits. She couldn't even testify as there wasn't any crucial evidence. He was about to be released without any charges. It was all Z's fault. Why did she have to interfere? He had thought of using the same method to send Z to prison. He had even worked with some detectives who wanted to make a contribution. But Z was too hard to catch. Now he finally had a chance. He changed his mind. He wouldn't let Z die so easily. He had to humiliate this person enough, and then shoot him dead with one shot. There were 5 cars. They had a complete set of equipment. Almost every one of them had at least 3 guns. There were a total of 15 of them and they were all mercenaries. They approached their destination silently. The quiet castle was the same as before. At this time, the pigeons would land in the courtyard and eat the food that had been scattered there. White roses bloomed on the vines and extended to the other side of the castle. Faintly, they could hear people making pastries. They didn't seem to notice the danger around them. At this moment, Leopard had reached the courtyard. He smiled. "Come on, boys. Let's give Z a surprise." The person standing next to him threw a grenade in after hearing his words. There was a loud bang. Leopard carried his gun and entered with his men. He fired at the inside of the door. The actions of this group of people were very barbaric. The pigeons flew up in fright. The female owner, who was already far away from the surroundings of the castle, sat in the car and frowned. "What's that sound? Mommy, is it little brother's house releasing fireworks? I should have stayed behind. That way, I can watch little brother." The little girl ate the biscuits. The male owner's fingers paused. "Mei Lin, prepare the gun." "Okay." In foreign countries, some people with farms had the right to carry guns. The female owner wasn't stupid. She could hear that the sound just now wasn't simple. She turned and looked behind her. "Is it really okay?" The male owner didn't say anything. He had a bad feeling. However, he couldn't be sure. He didn't know who the owner of the castle had offended. The smoke caused by the small explosives dissipated. More than 10 people carried their guns and looked around. They didn't see anyone. The tea on the table was still steaming. The temperature hadn't dissipated. There were also the biscuits on the table and the silver fruit plate on the ground. Everything showed that there was someone in the castle. At this moment, the person beside him suddenly pointed in the direction of the second floor. "There's a figure there. Second floor by the window. Trying to escape." Leopard narrowed his eyes and gestured behind him. The few of them went upstairs in an instant. The two on the left and right guarded the bedroom door. Leopard kicked the door open and entered. He raised his gun and pointed it at the figure behind the curtain. He smiled. "Z, come out. Let's have a good talk. I didn't expect the famous Z to be afraid. Aren't you very arrogant?" The figure didn't move. Leopard scoffed. "Looks like you want me to invite you out. What king of hackers? Without the internet, you're just useless." As he spoke, Leopard raised his gun and aimed at the figure's long legs. There was a loud bang. Everyone's expression changed. This sound wasn't right. Leopard took a big step forward and reached out to pull the curtain. The person standing there wasn't a living person. It was a humanoid model. When he got closer it said, "Huh, who are you calling useless?" Chapter 11:20. Leopard took a big step forward and reached out to pull the curtain. He saw that the person standing there was not a living person at all, but a humanoid model. When he approached, it even said, "Who are you calling trash?" When the mercenaries saw the model, their expressions changed. They turned green and felt indescribably embarrassed. Coupled with the sound, everyone understood that they had been tricked. Leopard was the most furious. He swept the model furiously. "Where is Z?" Leopard pressed the Bluetooth earpiece beside his ear. His words were directed at Fan Jia. This model must be controlled by Z using the internet. "Find Z." Fan Jia knew that she had to find the person. However, when she entered the internet area, she realized that she couldn't break through the firewall. She couldn't find the person. Suddenly, a red dot flashed. Fan Jia immediately pressed the lock button. "First floor." "First floor?" One of them frowned. "We just came from the first floor. We didn't see anyone." "He's on the first floor." Fan Jia narrowed her eyes. Z made a defense, but there are so many machines. There will definitely be loopholes. Just now, Z wanted the model to speak and he had to give the command first. In this way, Z's position would be exposed. "I can find that spot in an instant." Z is on the first floor. The mercenaries glanced at each other. "Go downstairs," Leopard ordered. The mercenary closest to the door had just walked out of the bedroom when he saw an electric toy car that we used to play with when we were young. The only difference was that this toy car looked much cooler. It was probably made of a different material. "What is this?" The mercenary frowned. He was about to lift his leg when a loud bang was heard. He and the other two mercenaries behind him were blasted from the second floor. He and the two people behind him were blasted down from the second floor. Their necks were crooked and they never got up again. F***CK. Leopard cursed. Where the hell is Z? Also, aren't you a hacker? Can you make these D*MN things stop? Fan Jia was frustrated. I'm thinking of a way. You guys can avoid them. Leopard cursed again. When he walked down, he had just reached the staircase when a small toy car ran over. The car was a real replica with the Land Rover logo. It had a valiant and high-spirited air. When all the mercenaries saw the small toy car, they stopped in their tracks in an instant. They didn't even dare to take a big step forward. It was a classic scene. The remaining 10 or so people were trying to find a way to avoid the small toy car. Leopard used one hand to support himself on the stairs beside him and jumped down. However, at this moment, someone pointed outside the window. One of them suddenly pointed outside the window. His eyes were wide open, shaking back and forth. The mercenaries all looked in the direction their companions were pointing. Their eyes met with the drones that flew up like dragonflies and circled around the castle, eyeing them covetously. It was Bo Jio's voice, lazy and mischievous. Tisk, stupid people can't be cured. Did you think I would place all the mechanisms in the toy car? Who are you looking down on, Leopard? Leopard would never forget this voice. Back then, this was the person who had sent him to prison. He had almost been unable to escape and had even been sentenced to death. I seem to have forgotten to welcome you. Bo Jio was dressed in a black leather jacket. She had a pair of earphones on her ears. Her lips were curved upwards. Beneath her silver hair was a beautiful face. Don't worry, you will definitely like the feast. Leopard was about to speak. There was a swoosh. The drones gathered together. Every one of them was aimed at a single point. Leopard's expression changed. He shouted, "Move aside." But it was too late. The sound of a machine gun rang out. It swept across the area. With the crisp sound of glass shattering, 3 or 4 of the mercenaries were gone. These mercenaries were skilled. That was why they had been able to dodge in that instant. But even if they had managed to dodge, they would have been severely injured. They leaned against the sofa or the wall, not daring to lift their heads. No one could go head-to-head with the drones. They had thought that they could avoid them by hiding under the sofa. But in the next second, the drones seemed to have seen them. The drones seemed to have seen where they were. They circled around the sofa and flew above their heads. ****F***CK. Leopard cursed. He was like a rat that was running away in a panic. Bo Jio's fingers flew across the keyboard. She had switched on a total of 4 computers. The image on each computer was the scene in the living room. There were even surveillance cameras around the castle. Looking at the scene, her lips curled up. It's been a year since we last met, and some of you have become more daring. Didn't anyone tell you that us hackers won't go against anyone in the underworld? But if you want to go against us and come to my place to cause trouble, then don't even think about going back. With that, Bo Jio moved her fingers. The drones changed their direction again. They started sweeping towards the mercenaries who wanted to shoot the drones. Leopard broke out in a cold sweat. He leaned against the wall. Even his breathing had changed. Someone was starting to feel afraid. He said to Leopard, "Boss, why don't we go back? Z is right. We shouldn't go against the hackers." "Shut up." Leopard narrowed his eyes. "Find Z." At this moment, Fan Jia said, "Cameras, there are cameras in the house. Shoot them down and the drones won't be able to find your location." Leopard looked up at the rotating cameras. He raised his gun, rolled, and shot down one of the cameras. Swoosh! One of the images on Bo Jio's side turned white. She raised a brow. Her expression didn't change. But in the living room, shooting down the camera would indeed create a blind spot. The drones in the castle weren't that advanced. Leopard could finally stand up straight. He took the opportunity when the drones seemed to have lost their target. He raised his gun and fired. There were 2 sounds of gunshots. 2 of the drones fell to the ground. The firepower was greatly reduced. The remaining 4 mercenaries also raised the guns in their hands and took the opportunity to shoot down the other 2. This meant that there were only 4 drones floating in the air. These people were all mercenaries. They had extraordinary battle experience. They reacted quickly and stood in the blind spot. That was where the cameras couldn't see them. They raised their guns and shot down another drone that tried to get close. Bang! Bang! As the last drone landed, a destructive smile appeared on Leopard's face again. There was a hint of murderous intent in it. Z, your last weapon is gone. Aren't you going to come out? There was no sound. After a burst of smoke, the castle became very quiet. However, the quieter it was, the more vigilant the people were, the more alert they would be. Bojo smiled. She held a metal rod in her hand and wore a black mask. Then she lifted her long legs and sat on a black tomahawk. Before she left, she pressed her finger down. The drone that had fallen to the ground suddenly exploded with a loud noise. The 5 mercenaries, who were still feeling smug, were blasted far away. Leopard, who had just boasted, felt dizzy. He swayed back and forth. He wanted to stand up. One of the mercenaries who wasn't injured shouted, "Boss!" Before he could raise his head, the sound of a motorcycle came from his right. It wasn't coming from the first floor. It came from the middle of the forest. It lifted the front wheels and rushed into the living room. Then it raised its metal rod. It waved it elegantly. There was a loud bang. Leopard was knocked to the ground by the stick. It was so painful that he almost stopped breathing at that moment. He shouted, "Shoot!" But in reality, when the mercenary saw the black motorcycle rushing towards them, his fingers were already numb from the shock. He didn't know where the youngster got her viciousness from. Before he could even react, an iron rod was already in front of him. When Bojo did this action, the moment she swung the rod, there seemed to be a sharp gust of wind. Her jacket flew up along with it. He was dressed in a black leather suit and looked very cool. Coupled with his silver hair, he looked very handsome. The moment the mercenary fell, the deepest impression he had was the pair of deep and pure eyes under the black mask. It was too dark. It was so dark that he could only feel the indifference in it. He remembered the warning they had received before they came. That warning was like this: "You can offend anyone but young Lord Z of the hacker world." But they didn't care. Wasn't he just a powerful person on the internet? Could he be more powerful than them in real life? But now, the mercenaries regretted it. They were wiped out. There were more than 10 of them and they entered the castle. They were beaten up by a single person and didn't even have the strength to retaliate. In the hall, Bojo held the handlebars of the motorcycle with one hand and stopped with a beautiful swing. One of her long legs stretched out and the tip of her foot was on the ground. She looked down at the mercenaries lying on the ground. At that moment, they felt that they weren't looking at a hacker but a Grim Reaper from a comic. A Grim Reaper with an outstanding aura and holding a metal rod. Bojo exerted force with her left hand and the motorcycle slid forward. She stopped in front of Leopard. "Someone like you is actually alive. It seems like throwing you in jail isn't enough." Z. Leopard hated this person to the core. At this moment, even his shout was filled with anger. His chest was heaving up and down as though he was going to fight someone with all his might. Bojo didn't get down from the motorcycle. She just looked at him and said calmly, "You're not convinced? Hold it in." Leopard narrowed his eyes. He seemed to have realized something. He wanted to continue stalling for time but his hand touched a gun. He was about to raise his hand. Bojo swung the rod again. This time it hit his wrist. There was a crisp sound. Then, she swung the rod again. Leopard was in so much pain that his body curled up. He broke out in cold sweat and his entire body twitched a few times. He lay there and didn't get up again. In the end, there was only one mercenary left. The mercenary was extremely afraid. He should have listened to Kos. He shouldn't have barged in. He would definitely die too. Go back and tell the person who hired you that they don't have to look for me anymore. I will go and look for them. The mercenary heard the sound of the metal rod sliding across the floor. He looked at the tall and straight youngster standing against the light. When he opened his mouth, the taste of blood filled his mouth. He didn't dare to make another move even though the gun was right beside his hand. The mercenary knew very well that the girl who had instructed them to follow behind them must have escaped. They thought that it was foolproof and that they would be able to quietly destroy Z's nest. But who would have thought that they would be the ones being destroyed? That wasn't all. They didn't even see each other's faces. The mercenary watched as the pure black tomahawk made another turn. Just like when it came, it was extremely swift and fierce. The only thing that could be seen was the gust of wind behind the youngster the moment he took off his black mask. The mercenary's thoughts were right. When things were too late, Fan Jia had already escaped in the car. Fan Jia had already fled in her car. It could be described as deathly pale. It could only be described as deathly pale. She also didn't expect that Z would be so cunning. When she was attacking the network, Z showed her a fake IP. She didn't expect Z to be so cunning. When she was attacking the network, Z showed her a fake IP. Fan Jia had always thought that Z was on the first floor, but in reality, Z wasn't even in the castle. Fan Jia had seen the figure jump out. From the start, she had wanted to move, but she realized that everything was too fast. Every time the metal rod landed, she could almost hear the sound of bones breaking. She couldn't handle such skills. She had thought that Leopard's sneak attack would succeed, but Fan Jia tightened her grip on the steering wheel. Her gaze was dark. The more Z behaved like this, the more she hated him. She remembered what her brother had said. That year, in order to kill Z, her brother had used many methods. After that, he had left many traps just to clear this obstacle. However, Z's psychological defense was very low. She wasn't like Qin Mo. If Qin Mo hadn't appeared at that time to block the hypnosis for Z, Z would have been crippled. Hence, her brother had always been afraid of Qin Mo. Even after being hypnotized, he was still able to control himself at that moment. But the past was the past. Now was the present. In Qin Mo's heart, the most important person to him was already dead. The most important person to him was already dead, which meant that he had a psychological defect a long time ago. She had to think of a way. She had to think of a way. She had to get Qin Mo first. When the time came, she would use Qin Mo to deal with Z. Someone must have leaked the information for this operation. The information couldn't have been leaked from their side. Could it be that hacker? Fan Jia's gaze turned vicious. She had really thought too little. She hadn't expected that a person could use a special method to send out a signal before he died. They must have had a special method. Otherwise, she would have been able to discover it when she was monitoring the other party's network. No matter what, she wouldn't let Z continue to live. It would be best for Qin Mo to deal with Z. Chapter 11:21. In the distance, the last ray of light disappeared. The surroundings of the castle returned to its original state. It was still covered with trees. There was only a pure black tomahawk passing through the sunset on the straight asphalt road. One could vaguely hear the sound of clothes fluttering in the wind. On this day, all the hackers sent out a declaration of war. They would never sell information to the organization that planned the maiden's sacrifice. From today onwards, they would never stop tracking the organization. Fan Jia, who had been driving away in a hurry, hadn't realized the consequences of her actions. Until a call came in. His voice was deep. Before you went, I told you not to make a move on Fifth Avenue. If you make a move there, you won't be able to gain anything. I also told you not to attempt to capture Z. Now that you're doing this, it seems like we're in a passive position. Even our business is affected. Have you thought about the consequences of being tracked by so many hackers? The screen didn't show the person on the other end of the call. From Fan Jia's expression, it wasn't hard to tell that she was both fearful and respectful of the person. I didn't think it through, but I already thought of a way to deal with Z. We will start with Qin Mo and let him deal with Z. You won't be able to get close to Z. You won't be able to get close to Qin Mo either. The voice on the other end of the call calmed down. Fifth Avenue isn't our home ground. Compared to what you have in mind, it's better to kill more Chinese in America so that the troops at the border won't focus on our organization. As for Qin Mo, he paused. I received news that someone intends to let him return to the army to carry out the mission to wipe us out. Once Qin Mo and the people he brought out are in the army, we will be in trouble. However, there is something that is beneficial to us. If Qin Mo comes, I can reactivate the hint your brother planted in his mind. Once our plan is complete, we will follow your plan and let Qin Mo deal with Z. Now, you should continue with your actions and create as much chaos as you can. Continue with my plan, create more murders. Fan Jia wasn't stupid. She calmed down and thought about it. That was indeed the right thing to do. There were many people in this world. As long as they were around, the maiden's sacrifice could be completed easily. No matter how capable Z was, he could only stop the incident. He couldn't control human nature. She knew this better than that person. Just watch. Their game of chess would not end so easily. The girl she had chosen should be making her move now. Indeed, that girl still did not know that something had happened to her father. She had always liked to talk about her father's profession on the internet, and she had never thought that it was because of her vanity that she had chosen someone as a chess piece. It was just that no one who was a pawn felt that they were being used. Or rather, they were willing to do some things. For example, right now, the girl had left a comment under the author who was defending his rights. This is so annoying. As a viewer, all I care about is whether I can continue reading what I've read. Both sides are fans, and I'm simply reading the book. I don't care about copyright infringement, but I feel that the original author is quite pretentious. First, he dug his own grave, and that's not enough. The original author's mother is still holding on to this matter, and in the end, he still dug his own grave. I'll say it again, I'm just stating the facts. What shocked her was that there was still a group of people replying to her. I think so too. Besides, copyright infringement is a matter of opinion. Even if it's a plagiarism, I still like to read it. Similarly, I'm a fan of both sides and have the same thoughts as the original poster. I sincerely hope that we can coexist peacefully. The fans of the original author have no manners and are too overbearing. Every comment was filled with extremely twisted views, but the accomplices felt that they were all charming little angels. Especially this girl. After leaving her comment online, she left the house. After all, the contact had told her that if the person she hated wanted to be punished, she had to do something herself. If she needed to do something, there were letters and tools in the mailbox. As long as she went to retrieve it and follow the method provided, it would be fine. It was obvious that the girl was very happy. It was really enough of those people who claimed to be righteous on the internet. These people were either too young or a bunch of poor villagers who did not even have the most basic upbringing. She had only said a sentence that couldn't be any more normal, and those people said that her values were not right. The internet was really too violent. However, this did not affect her at all. She had never been able to communicate with stupid people. But until today, why hadn't her father transferred her money? Didn't he know that her expenses abroad were very high? It would be her birthday in 2 days. How she planned her birthday party would directly affect her status in the Chinese community. It had not been easy for her to get to know her current group of friends. If the money was not in place, the people in the circle would definitely think that her family was not rich enough. At the thought of this, the girl became slightly annoyed. She decided to call her family to hurry up and give her money after she took the things in the mailbox. The mailbox in the school was very long. It was like a small cabinet. After opening it, the things inside could be seen. The girl's lips were still curled up until she opened the cabinet door. Suddenly, the sound of a bell rang out. It was as if her action had touched a switch. It was indeed so. Because someone was waiting for him here. They were all detectives. When they saw that the person who came to the mailbox was really a girl, their eyes all widened. After all, the prediction was too accurate. The man who was leading the team was relatively calm, because he knew very well how capable Qin was. When Qin came to find him, he had a premonition that the case was about to be solved. As expected. But after seeing the girl's innocent appearance, he couldn't help but ask, "Qin, how did you lock onto the target?" When the girl heard this sentence in English, she subconsciously looked in that direction. There was a silhouette standing against the light. The silhouette had one hand in his pocket and was leaning against the mailbox. He exuded an aura that did not belong here. I've used the killer's method to try to contact someone. Whoever comes to the mailbox to get something is obviously an accomplice in the next case. Qin Mo walked out, his figure becoming clearer and clearer. The girl finally saw the outline of his face clearly. She had never encountered such a thing before. He was surrounded by so many police detectives in America. The girl's face was pale, and she kept shouting that she wanted to see the people from the consulate. Qin Mo didn't even want to look at her, even though he knew that there was a high possibility that she would be sent back due to lack of evidence. After all, she wasn't the murderer. However, this kind of person was no different from a direct murderer. Ever since the case appeared, Qin Mo had been wondering if these people were related in some way. After all, the mastermind behind all of this would not just find a random person to help him. Therefore, there must be some kind of connection between them. He didn't think of it. Really think through the most important thing. It was when he was about to leave the castle. He pulled up all the information on a certain person's computer and opened the previous preview record. All the people who were chosen in a certain case were either defending the thief, feeling that infringement didn't matter, or saying that they were fans of both sides. They had something in common. These people were accomplices in the beginning, but in the end, they were targeted by the murderer and cleaned up. They had something in common. All of them had made similar comments. And before they died, all of them had looked for this person, saying that they didn't like the person they saw and wanted to teach that person a lesson. The reply they received was that they needed to do something personally. After doing these things, they would be cleaned up by the new people, an endless cycle of evil. And after finding this common point, Qin Mo asked Fatty to filter countless, only locking onto the foreign IP. After locking onto them, he asked Fatty to send each of them a message. The content was sent in a grid, and the words were exactly the same as the content they had received previously. There was always a person behind this case who had never shown his face. It was this person who had never shown his face, using the darkness in everyone's hearts to carry out the murder. And if he wanted to make someone an accomplice, the last step would be to let them use the mailbox to get the tools. After Qin Mo grasped this point, he sent a message and waited for the person to come by the mailbox. The girl still wanted to argue. But it was already useless. The police detectives here weren't to be trifled with. Faced with such a vicious case, they all made the best adjustments. In just one day, using the method Qin Mo said, they caught no less than 6 Chinese girls in various places where they studied and grew up. Once this cycle was broken, it would be difficult to reconnect. But the police detectives in charge of this matter still felt a chill down their backs. If these 6 people weren't arrested by them, it meant that there would be the next victim. But thinking about this carefully, some of these victims were innocent, and some were accomplices themselves, but they were just cleaned up. If it hadn't been for those accomplices, the first victim wouldn't have died. In other words, this was a case of an accomplice harming people. Compared to the direct murder of the murderer, it made people's hearts heavier. It was difficult for them to type out such a report and hand it in. Fortunately, this evil cycle was broken by them. If it hadn't been for Qin, they wouldn't have thought it would be such a case. With this thought, the detective looked towards Qin Mo, walked over, and patted his shoulder with his left hand. With a sigh, he said, "Qin, let's have a drink later, let me thank you properly." Chapter 11:22. Other matters? What other matters? Wasn't the case under control? The chief inspector didn't understand. Foreigners always looked a little confused when they were confused. Please refer to the question mark picture of a black man. At this time, the sky outside was completely dark. There was also a Lamborghini parked in the university. It was not uncommon to see sports cars of the same price in the university. Therefore, the pure black Lamborghini did not look too flashy. Of course, that was just an illusion. Ever since the Lamborghini was parked here, it had been very boring. He felt bored because his master's little ferry didn't turn off its intelligence system. When Xiao He was bored, it began to scan its companions. Its master always laughed at it for not having eyes. Did she think that its rearview mirror was dead? It tries to say hello to the narrator's Land Rover. The Land Rover was cold and aloof, ignoring it. In the end, it figured out that other than itself, the rest of the cars shouldn't be intelligent. This feeling of being the only one awake while the world was asleep was very comfortable. Let's play some music to get high. Just as the smart navigation system fluctuated, a university professor happened to be driving and was shocked by the sudden movement of the car next to him. There was no one in the car, so how did the music come out? The professor tilted his head to take a closer look. "Is there a problem with my car?" A faint voice came into his ears. "No, it's very cool." The university professor smiled. He must have wanted to see how the car could play music on its own. Qin Mo walked to the side of the car, whispered the password, and pulled the door open. After the car beside him left, he said, "Didn't your master tell you that if you suddenly make a sound, people will treat it as a supernatural event?" "Master said that you don't have to care about these details." Qin Mo remained silent, turning the steering wheel with one hand. The navigation system became serious at this moment. It had to be serious. Its owner's little vixen never played by the book. Where do you want to go? Automatically guide the route. Qin Mo tilted his handsome and elegant face. He seemed to be a little silent. Finally, he said, "Let's go back to the castle." Back to the castle? The black Lamborghini was shocked. Was this person crazy? It was one thing for him to willingly be kidnapped, but now he still wanted to return to the castle? It really couldn't understand such complicated humans. However, if Master saw that her little fairy was going back, she would definitely be happy. She would definitely be happy. The smart navigation system could also analyze fluctuations. Sometimes it was true that they would ask questions. In the face of such a question, Qin Mo's voice was calm. "If I leave after sleeping with me, wouldn't I be letting your master have it easy?" The black Lamborghini thought. What a devil. Check if there's a Burger King nearby. Qin Mo didn't seem to care about the erratic navigation. Black Lamborghini, we need to take a detour. Go around. One word, simple and clear. The black Lamborghini was now wondering whose car it belonged to. He thought he would wait outside for a while. She didn't expect the man to order takeout, so she just put it aside and didn't eat it. As a smart car, the Lamborghini had some analytical abilities. Master buys this every time he comes out. She likes to eat this kind of junk food. Qin Mo's voice carried his usual nonchalance. The black Lamborghini fluctuated again. So, you bought this one? Don't you know that your master loves to feed me? It's convenient to feed her with fries and chicken strips. Black Lamborghini. In order to let master feed you, you even brought your own tools. How shameless. Why did it feel that the information it had received from its master was all wrong? This great demon king was clearly enjoying it. It felt that master seemed to have misunderstood something. When there was a chance, it would tell master about this devil's scheme. In fact, Qin Mo bought these things not only because he wanted to be fed, but also because he knew that she liked to eat these things. If he came out like this today, she would definitely be depressed. He didn't have time to buy sweets. He was worried that if he took too much time, a certain someone's imagination would run wild. Hence, he bought a bag of chicken strips. At least when she saw food, she wouldn't always droop her ears. Even though she still looked pretty, he felt uncomfortable every time he looked at her. Thinking about that fellow's furry head drooping and her listless look, Qin Mo instinctively accelerated to the maximum. The Batmobile sped up very quickly. In an instant, it overtook 4 cars and swept towards the bridge. The night sky of New Yao was revealed at this time. The dazzling lights were like stars in the sky. One could hear the music coming from the sports car. Such a scene gradually faded when they reached the outskirts. The castle in the depths of the forest was always very quiet. But today, this tranquility was too much. There wasn't even a single light. Even the torches outside weren't lit. From afar, only the outline of the castle could be seen. Qin Mo stopped the car. His uninjured hand was still holding the takeaway bag. The moment his eyes saw the castle, there wasn't a trace of warmth in them. He hurried over and pushed open the destroyed door. Even without the light, with his experience, he could see that there were traces of fighting and explosions. Qin Mo had never felt like this before. His entire body stiffened. Then he strode down the basement. The only thing he could think of was that if something had happened, that fellow might have avoided the attack in the basement. But she didn't. There was no one in the basement. Qin Mo forced himself to calm down. Even when he pressed the answer button, his fingers were trembling slightly. Young Master. The shadow guards didn't expect young Master to turn on the receiver at this time. After all, when he was alone with young Master Jiao, he would definitely block them. Qin Mo took a deep breath. He gripped the staircase railing as if this was the only way to clear his mind. Go and find out which mercenary organization has been mobilized recently. I want to know the results immediately. Hearing the voice on the other end of the earpiece, the shadow guards glanced at each other and immediately replied, yes. They had never heard young Master order them in such a tone. What exactly happened over there? Probably no one could understand Qin Mo's feelings at this moment. He stood there, as if there was an unbearable emptiness in his chest. He just stood there emptily. At that moment he thought about many things. The most important thing he thought about was that he shouldn't go out. Even if he wanted to go out, he should bring that person along. Chapter 11:23. It was a nervous pain. Qin Mo pressed down on his head instinctively. The feeling of being drowned in seawater was extremely familiar. It was so familiar that he felt as though he had experienced it himself. It wasn't a dream. Qin Mo endured the pain, but he realized that he couldn't resist it. Fragments of things surged into his mind. The most prominent thing was that there was a voice that sounded like glutinous rice that kept calling him. Momo, don't be shy. We are both girls. It's fine if I look at you. At that time, he had laughed coldly in his heart. Who's a girl? I'm a guy. But the voice couldn't disperse. It was hard for him to resist. Momo, if you ignore me like this, you won't have any friends. Before this person figured out his gender, it was okay for him to remain silent. Who knew that the voice wouldn't stop? Momo, this is all the money I have. It should be enough to buy you. I've checked on the internet. In China, there's a good saying. Money can make the devil push the desert. Momo was stunned. Idiot, money makes the world go round. Not a mo, that was what he had said. Even he himself didn't know why the final scene had turned into him holding a soft little fist and writing calligraphy on it. It was probably because the voice had said, "Aren't we both Mo?" That was why he had taught the little bean how to write. But he couldn't see the little bean's face. It was probably too painful. Qin Mo wanted to stand up, but he realized that the more he wanted to know, the more he resisted. Only when he felt the pain in his palm did he wake up from the chaotic pain. His eyes were deep and his thin lips seemed to be plated with a layer of white. He looked around. There were still a few computers running. The owner was gone. Yes, gone. The moment Qin Mo thought about how the person who had hugged his waist and seduced him yesterday had disappeared, his heart felt as though it had been hammered. It wasn't painful, but it was so dull that it made it hard for him to breathe. Hence, even though he was smart, he didn't notice the details immediately. Instead, he walked quickly to the ranch closest to the castle. He wanted to ask the people who lived there where his Mrs. Qin had gone. It was the first time he had lost his manners. The knocks on the door were very loud, but after the third knock, there was no one inside. Even the old sports car that was parked in the ranch was gone. Perhaps the owner of the house was afraid that someone would come to visit, so he specifically wrote on the side that he was going on a trip and would not be around in the near future. After reading that sentence, Qin Mo gradually regained his rationality. What a coincidence. This is the time to travel. Qin Mo took a deep breath, holding on to a certain someone's favorite takeout as he walked back to the castle. This time, he wasn't as impatient as he was last time when he only wanted to see a certain someone. Instead, he focused his attention on the details of the environment. All the cameras in the castle were turned on, which was different from when he left. There were more than 10 down drones on the floor. He had seen those drones before. The tea set in the living room had disappeared. No debris fell to the ground. In other words, it was taken away by someone. Qin Mo seemed to have figured something out. He walked to the second floor and opened all the wardrobes. It wasn't just a certain someone's clothes that were missing. 2 of the suits that the old butler usually wore were missing. The suitcase that had been placed under the wardrobe was also missing. No organization would take away the clothes of the kidnappers when they kidnapped them. It seemed like they had planned to leave in advance. Moreover, there were the people lying on the floor. Qin Mo's fingers paused. Before he could take a step, a series of sirens came from outside the castle. The police cars were here. And it was a large number of police cars. The police cars stopped in front of the castle one after another. The headlights shone through the door. One of the police detectives suddenly narrowed his eyes, raised his gun and shouted, "There's someone inside!" However, Qin Mo didn't seem to hear the sound. He raised his eyes and looked at the camera in the room. There must be a recording on the few computers in the basement. The person inside, raise your hand. I will count down from 10 seconds. If you don't come out within 10 seconds, I have the right to shoot you. 9, 8. Wait a minute. The detective, who had just gotten out of the car, recognized the slender figure that walked out of the castle. He reached out his hands and gestured for everyone to put down their guns. "We're on the same side." On the same side? The detectives couldn't believe that someone had arrived earlier than them. In fact, the detective was full of questions too. He walked to Qin Mo's side. "The moment you left, I received a call from the higher-up saying that there were gunshots here. However, we weren't sure, so we came over to take a look. Why are you here?" Qin? Could he predict it in advance? Or did he calculate it? After all, Qin was an expert in this field. Could it be that the incident here was related to the maiden's sacrifice? If that was the case, things were serious. What kind of clue did Qin think of to come here? With that thought, the detective's expression turned serious. But very quickly, he realized that Qin Mo's gaze wasn't on him. He seemed to be in a daze. "Qin?" He called again. There was still no response. Until he was wondering if he had disturbed Qin Mo's thoughts. A familiar deep voice rang in his ears. "Get your men to move the people lying inside. Don't touch anything in the castle." "Don't touch anything?" The detective frowned. "If we don't touch anything, we won't be able to investigate the scene." Qin Mo's expression was still the same. No one could tell if he was happy or angry. His tone was calm. "Before you came, I had already investigated. It was an invasion by mercenaries." With that, he threw something to the detective. "Help me investigate which organization this is. Besides, this castle belongs to my wife. I will be staying here in the future. You can ask me directly if you want any information. Move the people away and get your men to go back. She doesn't like to be disturbed." When the detective heard this, his instincts told him that someone was taking revenge on Qin Mo. He immediately said, "Qin, your wife." "I will look for her myself," Qin Mo interrupted him. The detective was even more certain of his guess. As expected, Qin was involved in the maiden's sacrifice case. That was why he was being targeted. But when did Qin have a wife? Why hadn't he heard of it? If this hadn't happened, he would have been shocked and wanted to find out more about it. But now he wouldn't ask. He definitely wasn't in the mood to talk about it. The only thing he could do was to follow Qin Mo's instructions and get his men to clear the scene. Any mercenary group would be extremely cruel and ruthless. The chief inspector looked at the people being carried out and imagined a scene. There were probably too many mercenaries. After fighting for a while, they didn't have the ability to resist and a beautiful young lady was taken away. The detective couldn't bear to think about what happened next. He just said to Qin Mo, "When the organization is found, I will report to the higher-ups and get them to send people to look for her. Don't worry, we will definitely find her." "There's no need." Unexpectedly, that person gave him this word. The detective didn't understand. What was Qin thinking? Could it be? There was indeed a situation. If the police didn't take action, the other party wouldn't kill the hostage. That meant that Qin was probably worried about this when he said he wanted to look for her himself. The detective thought through the situation according to his usual way of thinking. He patted Qin Mo's shoulder. "Let me know if you need anything." "Okay." Qin Mo was obviously distracted. The more the detective looked at Qin Mo, the more he felt an indescribable feeling. It was as though Qin Mo had been hollowed out and didn't speak much. Even though he didn't speak much in the past, the concept was different. It would take some time to clear the scene. The detective was led astray by his own thoughts. In addition, he kept thinking about the phrase, "my wife's castle." Hence, he didn't notice the minute details. Before he left, he suggested that two men stay behind to protect Qin Mo. Qin Mo stuffed a hand into his pocket, seemingly in a daze. When he heard the detective's words, he replied, "There's no need, my men will be here soon. They are just around here." "All right." The detective didn't force it. After all, he was clear about Qin Mo's identity and ability. After getting his men into the car, he bade farewell to Qin Mo. The report was a little difficult to type. But such mercenary revenge was indeed common overseas. As the police car disappeared, the castle returned to its nighttime tranquility. The castle returned to the silence of the night. Two of the chandeliers in the hall were broken, but it didn't affect the overall lighting. Qin Mo stood there, looking at the tracks left by the motorcycle in the courtyard. He turned his handsome face, elegant and noble. Then, he was about to take a step forward. The Lamborghini, which was parked at the side and hadn't been turned off, emitted a sound. I can't detect Master's presence. Can you tell me what happened? Why were there so many police cars here? There have never been any police cars here before. In the past, it and its master's daily routine was to get rid of the police cars. Why were there police cars in the castle? She isn't here. Qin Mo walked towards the Lamborghini. It seemed as though he had the strength to continue speaking after hearing the sounds around him. The smart navigation system rippled. What happened to those police cars? The castle was attacked. Qin Mo summarized everything in one sentence. Mercenaries. The smart navigation system rippled even stronger. Are you saying that Master was discovered by some enemies? But under normal circumstances, Master wouldn't just sit and wait for death. Indeed, she didn't sit and wait for death. Qin Mo turned his head. His eyes as clear as water but very deep. His voice was faint in the night. She just left. Chapter 11:24. Unexpectedly, the navigation system heard the word desolation in that voice. Qin Mo's men arrived quickly, like shadows. The first thing he did was to return the phone to young Master. Now that young Master didn't have to pretend to be kidnapped by young Master Jiao, the receiver was useless. However, the shadows felt that their young master was different from when he first arrived. But they couldn't pinpoint the exact difference. They saw their young master sitting on the sofa, holding the phone in his hand as though he was waiting for some news. The shadows thought that young master would return to the Yin family since old master had come to America from China. But after waiting for a long time, there was no movement from young master. Was he planning to wait in the castle for the entire night? The shadows exchanged glances and found a position to stand guard. The castle was extremely quiet. The sound of the clock ticking could be heard clearly. From 11 o'clock to 3 o'clock in the morning, and from 3 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the morning, the hour hand moved through one grid after another. Even when the sky started to brighten, Qin Mo's phone didn't ring. There wasn't even a message. He was waiting. He was waiting for a certain person to contact him. However, the special ringtone that was specially set for a certain person seemed to have disappeared. Qin Mo stood up and made a call back to China. The first thing he said was, "I want to know Hoshino's current location." Magician picked up the call. He thought that his boss wouldn't call him before he found a way to find Hoshino. But the truth proved that he was too naive. "I lost him." Qin Mo's fingers tightened when he heard the 3 words. Magician wore his earpiece and looked at the crowd around him. "I followed him to Tokyo. I thought he was here, but when I came to my senses, I realized that he had bought a ticket to America. I found the flight number. I'll see if I can get our men to stop him." The moment he heard the 2 words, America, Qin Mo could roughly guess some things. He had never hated his ability to make deductions as much as he did right now. It was obvious that Hoshino was here to meet up. The attack was sudden and perhaps unexpected. But to leave the castle and not to bring him along, this was a decision that person had made long ago. Everything was so neat and tidy, which meant that they didn't leave because of the attack. They just left a little earlier than planned. At this thought, Qin Mo's gaze dimmed. It wasn't like before, where it would always carry a clear and cold glint, like an unsheathed snow sword. Magician waited for a long time but didn't get a response from his boss. He couldn't help but turn his head and call out, "Boss." After what felt like a long time, the other side replied with 3 plain words, "There's no need." The sound seemed to be tainted with the humidity outside, giving the magician the illusion that it was not real. Was he thinking too much? Why did it feel like boss was in a particularly low mood? The shadows could feel this as well. It wasn't just the shadows. Even the black Lamborghini, whose car door had been opened by Qin Mo, felt that the devil that her master had picked up wasn't as noble as he was yesterday. "I have to drive you away so that she might come back." The man's voice was deep and hoarse. The black Lamborghini showed its curves in a serious manner. "There's no point in holding me hostage. Master told me the day before that if you want to leave, you can drive as you please." When Qin Mo heard this, his hands that were on the steering wheel paused. Before he left, he had thought that a certain someone would be in the castle waiting for him since he had disappeared. But now, His imagination was like a slap to his face. She didn't wait for him. Instead, she allowed him to leave. Your voice password has been reset. This wasn't a question and it carried a strong aura. The black Lamborghini couldn't lie about this. Yes, Master made adjustments. In the past, there was a voice recognition function. Now, as long as you say the password, you can unlock it. When Qin Mo heard this, he understood everything. He turned his head and looked at the takeaway bag on the passenger seat. It seemed to be reminding him of something. That feeling was like he was confident that he could keep her. But in fact, when he lifted his leg and took a step forward, there was still a step in front of him. Crack! His head was bleeding. Qin Mo raised his hand and held his forehead. The corners of his mouth lifted as though he was smiling. But the black Lamborghini didn't feel a trace of warmth in it. Then there was a swoosh. Qin Mo opened the car window and threw the takeaway bag into the bin. The shadows watched from the side. One of them asked, "Young master, are we still investigating that organization?" "Yes." Qin Mo's voice was cold. "After we find out, ask the Federation to cooperate with us. Put them on the international wanted list." The shadows replied, "Yes." Seeing that their young master didn't have the slightest intention to start the car, he tilted his handsome face and seemed a little absent-minded. He opened his mouth again. "Young master, should we go back now? There was no one here. There was no point in staying, right?" Qin Mo didn't say anything. After almost a minute, he started the car and said, "Leave 2 people behind to watch the surroundings." Then, he sped up and disappeared in front of the castle. The shadows never expected that one day, they would be reduced to workers who looked after the castle. Lin Feng also realized that Bo Jiu couldn't be contacted. These days, Lin Feng had obviously changed. The biggest change was in his hairstyle. In order to make it look more nimble, he used a hairband to tie his hair. His dressing style had also changed. Who would have thought that a person who called him grandfather every day would look so good in a suit? "Master, I have to apply for leave today." Lin Feng finished the last mouthful of porridge and raised his head to look at the person who had brought him. The man ate slowly. He was still flipping through the documents in his hands. When he heard Lin Feng's words, he frowned and said, "You made this, Captain. It will end after lunch with the investor. Why are you telling me that you want to apply for leave at such a crucial time? My best childhood friend is leaving the country today." Lin Feng shifted his gaze. "I have to send him off." The man wanted to say something but the phone in his hand rang. It was the old CEO. He was coughing when he spoke. After listening to the content, the man glanced at Lin Feng. He praised him and said faintly, "It seems like you didn't run away from home to work, young Master Lin." Lin Feng choked. He felt slightly guilty. The man didn't say much. "There's still one more night. Once you're done, hurry over. Even if you're young Master Lin, you have to be there when it's time to drink." "No problem." Honestly, he was older than him and had a stronger aura. But Lin Feng wasn't afraid. Since he had started from the bottom, he wanted to learn something from this person. After all, this person was famous in the business circle. After leaving the breakfast shop, Lin Feng started to call Bo Jiu. He wanted to ask Little Spade what he should say since Yun was leaving, but Bo Jiu's phone rang. Unexpectedly, Bo Jiu's phone was switched off. Lin Feng had just frowned when he received a message from the Empress Dowager. "Whose flight is in the afternoon? Let's have a family gathering." Lin Feng replied neatly, "Okay." He then asked, "All right, Mom, where are we going?" Mother Lin probably felt that her son was hopeless, so she called him back. "Say, I'm so smart and beautiful. How did I give birth to such a stupid son like you?" "Same place, private room. Almost everyone is here. We're just waiting for you." "Sure, I'll head over now," Lin Feng replied. "Smart and beautiful Madam Lin. Hurry." Mother Lin smiled. "Do you want to talk to who?" "It's okay, I'll drive." Lin Feng could vaguely hear the commotion over there. It was Yunhu's voice. Even though it was soft, he could hear it clearly. The call ended quickly. She was probably afraid that if Yunhu really picked up, they would have an awkward conversation. Lin Feng didn't know that Yunhu was already on the phone. When he heard the busy tone, his fingers paused. "Auntie," he hung up. "Hung up? Mother Lin was happy today. She didn't notice Yunhu's emotions. He has been busy these 2 days. He probably hasn't finished his work. Auntie. Yunhu opened his mouth, as if he wanted to ask something. Mother Lin turned her head. Yunhu knew some things that weren't suitable for the elders. Your sleeve. This dress has big cuffs, Mother Lin said as she pulled the sleeve back. Unbeknownst to her, Yunhu wanted to ask why he had to learn from that person. He probably hadn't expected that his position would be taken over by someone else. The burning sensation in his chest made him loosen his collar. He thought to himself that he was about to see that person, and he couldn't control his emotions any longer. He couldn't just make things awkward for everyone before he left. Even now, it wasn't any better between the two of them. At least it wasn't completely broken, right? But Yunhu didn't expect that person to still not appear when the food was served. Mother Lin had called to rush him but he hadn't picked up. He should be busy. It's the end of his project today. Madame Yun sighed. Lin Feng has really grown up. He's such a good son. Why isn't he ours? That's enough. I should be the one to take over your Yunhu. As mothers, they always despised their own children. Yunhu sat there, finishing the tea in his cup. He was about to stand up when Mother Lin said, "Let's eat first." Mama Lin said, "Let's eat first. We don't know when that kid will come. Huzi's plane can't be missed." Okay, let's eat first. Both families had a good relationship. The dining table was also bustling with noise and excitement. But Yunhu didn't have any appetite. He couldn't dampen everyone's spirits. In the end, he couldn't take it anymore. He found an excuse to leave the private room. He leaned against the soft carpeted corridor wall and tilted his head to light a cigarette. The moment he took a puff, he saw a person walking over in a hurry. He probably hadn't expected to see him in the corridor. That person was stunned. Luckily, I managed to make it in time. There was a traffic jam along the way. I almost got bronchitis. Why did you come out? Are you smoking? Mate. Yunhu didn't tell the truth. He looked at the sweat on Lin Feng's head and instinctively reached out, wanting to wipe it off. Lin Feng raised his hand instinctively. Sweaty? A lot. Yunhu held the cigarette in his hand. He retracted his hand and stuffed it back into his pocket. Go in. What about you? Lin Feng felt that his actions could be misunderstood. But he couldn't interact too much in case he went crazy. Yunhu raised the cigarette in his hand. I'll go in after I finish this. You can have 2 bites first. MH okay? Yunhu watched as the person entered. He mainly wanted to adjust himself. After he was done, he pushed the door open. Coincidentally, he heard the person say, "My master looks fierce but he's a good leader. I learned a lot from him." Yunhu tightened his grip on the door handle. He glanced over at the person who was stuffing food into his mouth. His gaze paused. They hadn't met for a few days. But he could clearly feel the change in a person. His skin had darkened but was still fairer than the average person. His face was still extremely good-looking, giving off a sense of vitality and beauty. But now, he looked more like a man. Especially when he lifted his lids and smiled. He was dressed in a well-ironed suit. He was different from the Lin Feng in his impression. Yunhu couldn't tell if this was good or bad. No matter what this fellow was like, it seemed to be able to affect all his emotions at the first moment. But similarly, he could clearly feel one thing. He was really losing this fellow. He was losing bit by bit. But there was nothing he could do. Lin Feng saw Yunhu enter. He pulled out the chair beside him and was about to chat with him before he left. He didn't want their relationship to fade after Yunhu went there. That was why he had been avoiding Yunhu recently. Just as he was about to speak, Yunhu's phone rang. Even though he turned off the screen, Lin Feng could roughly guess who it was. He didn't say much. He raised his wine glass, his dark eyes bright. Have a safe trip. It seemed to be the safest way to say it. The thoughts that occasionally bubbled up in his heart were also suppressed by this cup of wine. The two of them sat together and didn't speak much. Because they were about to leave, everyone's attention was on Yunhu. They didn't notice the difference in the atmosphere between the two of them. Even if they felt that the atmosphere was different, they thought it was normal. After all, the two of them grew up together. If one of them was leaving, the other would definitely be quiet. The atmosphere lasted until they reached the airport. The whole family was sending one person off. There seemed to be no place for Lin Feng. No matter how well Madame Yun educated her son, she was just an ordinary mother. Even though her son had been self-disciplined and independent since young, she still gave him a series of instructions. Separated by the crowd, Yun-Hu glanced up and met the smiling face. That person seemed to have received a sudden call. He turned his head to pick it up. Yun-Hu knew the huge gap in his heart at that moment. Even if that person was still there, he couldn't feel it. He probably couldn't take it anymore. Yun-Hu reached out and grabbed onto Lin Feng, who wanted to find a place to talk on the phone. Lin Feng's eyes widened. He froze because of the sudden hug. There were many people at the airport saying their goodbyes. This way, no one would be able to see through the brothers' embrace. But the man on the other end of the phone noticed the pause. He arched a brow and asked, "Lin Feng?" Since they were so close, Yun-Hu obviously heard the commotion. He seemed to have done it on purpose, his voice rising. "When I'm overseas, you should know your place in the country. Don't fool around all the time." In the past, Yun-Hu always said that to Lin Feng. The naive Lin Feng didn't think there was anything wrong with it. But in the man's ears, it had a different meaning. It was a warning that all men understood. The man paused for a moment. He hung up and glanced at the information on the table. There was Lin Feng's photo on the information. He was indeed interested in this. But he wasn't blind. He could tell that Lin Feng would occasionally stop to look at his phone when he wasn't busy. Being interested didn't mean that he had to snatch it. He was a man of integrity in this regard. The person on the other end of the phone was obviously warning the wrong person. Rather than warning him, he might as well warn some girls. Young Master Lin was a straight man. Lin Feng was indeed straight. He couldn't think of any other meaning. "I have to take time out every day to play games. Supreme Alliance lacks people. I'll leave after we recruit more people. I don't have time to fool around. As for you..." Lin Feng wanted to say that Yun-Hu was already taken. It wasn't good for him to keep hugging him, but he felt that he was being pretentious. For a moment, he was jealous of the person who could go overseas with him. But the more Lin Feng worked in society, the more he understood that he and Yun-Hu had nothing to talk about. Just like today's project. If it was in the past, when his grandfather was still in power, it wouldn't have been so difficult. Perhaps after Yun-Hu came back, he could get a project with just one sentence. But Lin Feng didn't want that. Simply put, he couldn't accompany Yun-Hu. They could only talk about romance. The Lin family was no longer the Lin family of the past. And Yun-Hu had someone to accompany him. It was best to retreat to the position of good friend. It was best for everyone. "What about me?" Yun-Hu glanced at the person standing in front of him. His gaze deep and unfathomable. Lin Feng hooked his long arm. "As for you, jump over the wall when you have time. There are films there that we don't have here. Also, wait for your wedding candy before we come back to play." Yun-Hu didn't say anything. The boarding announcement had already started. He didn't know how he had entered the security check. He only knew that the relationship that seemed to have eased up was actually very distant. It made him understand that he and Lin Feng couldn't go back to the past. More than once, he thought that it would be good if he could bear with it until he went overseas. But Yun-Hu understood. If he really liked someone, he couldn't bear it. Chapter 11:25. There was a huge transparent window at the international airport, allowing him to clearly see the plane taking off. His phone was still ringing in his pocket. Lin Feng moved but didn't pick up the call immediately. Instead, he sat on the chair, as though this was the only way to offset the emptiness that seemed to drown him. Wuxia had really left. When Lin Feng lowered his head, his lips curved upwards. Then he reached out to press the stray hair on his forehead. Mother Lin and the others hadn't left yet. When she turned around and saw Lin Feng in this state, a trace of surprise flashed across her eyes. But on second thought, the two of them had been good friends since they were young. How could he not feel sad after Wuxia left? On this day, even the esports media sent news. The title was, Where should Supreme Alliance go from here? Some fans who were still hoping that Almighty Yun would stay understood that the outcome was set. Supreme Alliance's current situation was undoubtedly difficult. Some people said that Supreme Alliance's current strength wasn't suitable for the Asian Cup. They were afraid that their current strength was only at the provincial level. At this moment, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that Supreme Alliance was besieged on all sides. But right at this moment, a netizen who claimed to be a fan of Spade Z posted an unofficial post. The content was about the things that Spade Z had done. Firstly, I'm not here to criticize him. I used to be his fan, but in the end, I can only say that different people can't make plans together. Firstly, let's talk about Spade Z's operations. I admit that he is indeed amazing, but other than that, I don't really care about this person. I just feel wronged for our group owner. He spent 2,000 to 3,000 on Spade Z the moment he arrived. It's really... The netizens felt that Spade Z was indeed too much. They all followed the post. Some netizens understood the logical loophole in the post. After all, they were still doubtful. Big Spade doesn't have a group, right? Everyone knows about this. Besides, you said at the start that you weren't here to criticize him, but why is it that the entire post is criticizing him? Forget it. I'm just complaining. The original poster chuckled. Back then, Spade Z told me to study hard and protect myself. Now that I think about it, I'm really too young. This person relied on this to gain so many fans. At this moment, another person followed. I really don't understand why Spade Z is like this. I'm speechless. Some of them clicked on it out of curiosity. After they clicked on it, they asked, asking you to study hard is also a black mark? After the post went viral, it was bound to be seen by the fans. From the OP's explanation, he didn't tell the truth at all. Back then, you guys created a private chat group to recruit people. After recruiting people, you made a big fuss there and even complained to the management. Why didn't the OP say all this? The increase in fans is due to the official recommendation. You are indeed too young. Ha ha ha, why do I feel like laughing when I see the words official recommendation? Young, indeed young. Let's not talk about other things. As an esports player, you don't need to substitute in. You just need to play well in every match. Don't you cherish your fans? Are you a fan? The one who played with Big Spade, drifting by. Alright, let's sink into Chieba. Let's go play on the official platform. Originally, this matter was basically over. However, another netizen appeared and used that post to reply with a title. Chapter 1126. This kind of title was too easy to attract people's attention. The netizen kept them in suspense. I know it's hard for people to believe this. I was shocked when I first heard this news. After all, no one would disguise themselves like this just to attract fans. Needless to say, this netizen knew how to manipulate the psychology of netizens. Speaking up to this point, he didn't continue revealing the truth. The more he did this, the more the netizens wanted to know what exactly was going on. OP, hurry up and tell us, how did Spade Z cheat his fans? What's going on? It's so annoying to say it halfway. Where is the OP? Fu Shiming sat in front of the computer. Seeing that the netizens were getting more and more curious, he pretended to say, I'm sorry, the OP is back. I'm still hesitating whether I should say this or not. After all, cheating fans is wrong, isn't it? OP, hurry up and tell us. Alright, since you guys are asking me that, I can only say it. Fu Shiming typed, don't be shocked when I say it. Spade Z is actually a girl, but everyone knows that in the esports scene, a girl's ability to gather fans isn't that strong. Nowadays, everyone likes to watch handsome guys play games, so they don't have a high tolerance for girls. Besides, a handsome male god will make everyone feel more immersed in the game. Someone decided to go all out. First she created the highlight of being the FC king, then she came out as a guy. I have to say, Spade Z really had a good plan. There weren't many words in this paragraph, but it was explosive news. All of the esports netizens flooded the forum in an instant. Girl. Spade Z? How is that possible? OP. Isn't this too ridiculous? I can't believe it. At this moment, the The netizen who posted the previous post seized the opportunity and immediately left a comment. If it's really like what OP said, then Spade Z is definitely cheating his fans. How can he say this and that? Doesn't he know what kind of person he is? Really, I was too naive in the past. This person is indeed good at gaming, but his character isn't that good. My big Spade girl? Oh no, I can't accept it. I feel like I've fallen out of love. What should I do? As the mastermind of this incident, Fu Ximing wouldn't allow them to continue speaking. I think Spade Z owes us fans an explanation. Back when Supreme Alliance organized the event, how much money did I spend to support him? Even if it's a lesson, we should seek an explanation from the officials. The original poster is right. We need to demand an explanation. The one who responded to Fu Ximing the most was the so-called fan who said he wasn't anti-fan. She went to the official Weibo and posted, Spade Z disguised as a man to trick fans. Disgusting. Shouldn't Spade Z give us an explanation? I used to like Spade Z a lot, but now, I've turned from a fan to a hater. I've never seen someone like this. I really like Spade Z, but whether it's from an emotional or logical point of view, I just want to know why Spade Z lied to us. Almost instantly, the entire official Weibo was filled with comments criticizing Spade Z for dressing up as a man. Fu Ximing didn't need to do anything at all. He just followed what that person had taught him and used the few people in the group to stir up this topic. It was such a huge matter. As the ace manager of Supreme Alliance and the director of the Qin Group, it was impossible for Feng Yi not to know about it. In just a short hour, the entire public relations team was in a state of panic. At this moment, the media seemed to have smelled the news and came up with a series of reports. Fu Ximing was in charge of stirring up the news online while Fu Zhongyi was in charge of contacting the media. It was a two-pronged approach to achieve the results he wanted. In reality, under such circumstances, be it Bo Jiu or Qin Mo, they wouldn't be this anxious. But these two people were not there. Feng Yi tried to contact his previous contacts but he couldn't get in touch with anyone. At this stage, everyone was probably hiding from Supreme Alliance. The media, the team, and some investors who had worked with them before. The public relations department was still observing the situation on the computer. They glanced up and asked anxiously, Boss Feng, should we release a statement? This is ridiculous. How can Big Spade be a girl? The public relations department thought they would receive Feng Yi's approval immediately. Unexpectedly, CEO Feng, who was standing there, raised his eyes. His voice was light but heavy. She is. 2 words. All the employees of the club were shocked. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. But the public opinion isn't right. Feng Yi walked over. Ever since Spade Z joined Supreme Alliance, she has always presented herself as a boy. It has to do with her family, not to attract fans. The staff were still in a daze. Big Spade. A girl? They still found it a little surreal. After all, that person didn't look like a girl at all. But from another perspective, if Spade Z was really a girl, to them, it would be a devastating backlash. Boss Feng, what should we do now? Feng Yi enunciated each word. Tell us the truth. But if that's the case. The staff wanted to say something. Feng Yi glanced at him. I believe if little Spade was here, she would choose to do the same. There is nothing to hide. She is a girl but she has been raised as a boy since young because she has an ungrateful father. Putting the affair aside, everyone in the business circle knows how Fu Zhongyi abandoned his wife. In order to get her to give up her shares, he forced her away along with his mistress. If little Spade hadn't been a boy, the mother and son wouldn't have survived. Ever since Spade Z debuted, the only thing that can't be said is that she disguised as a boy. All the malicious lies are built on the basis of hurting others. Little Spade has never hurt anyone. But no one will understand. The public relations staff knew what the people on the internet were like. They didn't care about things that weren't allowed to hurt others. They didn't care. They acted as an accomplice. They pushed those who wanted to seek justice into the dust. But when it came to other people's privacy, they felt that it was a huge mistake. They wanted the victim to be perfect. They couldn't denounce it because it meant that they were uncultured. They couldn't even have the slightest flaw. They supported those who sucked human blood and climbed up without any morals. The ordinary public relations staff understood this logic. As Feng Yi, how could he not understand? The truth isn't for others to understand, but for a clear conscience. Feng Yi turned, his gaze never leaving. He had to say it. The hype online was too much. There was an overwhelming amount of news. Layer after layer. The people in the industry understood that Supreme Alliance just had to deny the contents of the post. After all, they didn't have any concrete evidence. But out of everyone's expectations, Supreme Alliance admitted it and explained the truth. Seeing this, the fans exploded. Supreme Alliance was in an unprecedented crisis. Just as expected, countless people were trying to distance themselves from Supreme Alliance. Some clubs were also interested in this point. They contacted Shui Yaoyao directly, saying that they had their eyes on her future development and even offered a good price. They wanted to take the opportunity to poach Shui Yaoyao. You can see the situation now. Even if Supreme Alliance has the financial support of the Qin Group, it won't last long. In fact, it isn't just Spade Z's matter. Supreme Alliance is already falling apart. If you continue to stay in Supreme Alliance, you will only perish with Supreme Alliance. It will be different if you come to our team. You will get good resources and fame. Shui Yaoyao was still wearing Supreme Alliance's uniform. She was naturally shy and perhaps had a trace of inferiority, but at this moment, these words seemed to have disappeared from her. I will stay in the Supreme Alliance. As long as I'm still playing, I will only stay in the Supreme Alliance. Unless there comes a day when I don't play anymore, or if the Supreme Alliance disbands like you said. I might want to change places, but the Supreme Alliance is still here. Shui Yaoyao lowered her head, looking at the media surrounding the entrance of the club, pausing between each word. And, Supreme Alliance will not perish. You don't know what's good for you. The club manager hung up the phone. If he couldn't poach Shui Yaoyao, he could poach someone else. Shui Yaoyao was just a backup. But he didn't expect that all the answers would be the same. That wasn't all. What was even more unexpected was that Supreme Alliance was left with less than one team. At this moment, everyone walked to the entertainment department. Shui Yaoyao, Feng Shang, Yin Wuyao, Coco. Some of the other team members watching the live stream felt that these people were stupid. At this time, shouldn't they avoid arousing suspicion and quickly draw a clear line between them? Why were they still standing in front of the door? When the media saw them, they were like mosquitoes that finally saw fresh blood. All of them rushed over. Regarding the fact that Spade Z is actually a girl, what are your reactions after hearing about it? Do you feel cheated? How does Supreme Alliance plan to deal with this person? Will she be banned from the competition? Yin Wuyao was the oldest among them. He still looked indolent, but this time, his eyes lit up. He glanced at his teammates standing beside him and then looked at the camera. We already knew that Spade Z is a girl. To us, it doesn't matter if Spade Z is a boy or a girl. In order for Supreme Alliance to win, she charged into the opponent's blood pool with injuries and fought 1 against 5. She didn't let down the title of vice captain. She is a qualified esports player. You ask us if we feel cheated? Back when that youngster found us and brought us to the esports arena, to us, she was the person who pulled us out of the abyss. Now, we are all waiting for her return. Words for the readers. After the storm comes the sweetness. Farewell, my wives. Chapter 11:27. At this stage, the Supreme Alliance still dared to say such things. The media was shocked. After all, this meant that it wasn't just these people who were affected by such a negative topic. Other teams might even give up on their invitation, which meant that they were risking their careers. After saying such words, they might even lose everything. Feng Yi knew that it was impulsive, young and self-destructive. But at the same time, he knew it clearly. Supreme Alliance was such a group of people. They weren't afraid of offending anyone and didn't care about the public opinion. Even if they knew that some things they did would cause others to lose their fans, they would still do it. Because that was the only way they wouldn't go against their conscience. Fighting side by side, these 4 words weren't just said casually. There were no surprises. Yin Wuyao and Coco's live stream was cut off. The investors cut off all publicity for these 2 people. The reason was simple. They had designed the script for them to respond during the live stream, but they didn't listen and didn't expose Spade Z's scandals. What was the point? That day, Wuxia and Coco were politely invited out by a certain live stream platform. Some platforms would use such methods to punish professional players. There was one good thing about it. After all, they were esports players and not live stream celebrities. But there would still be an impact. Without publicity on the internet, it meant that their popularity would drop. This was what the live stream platform was doing. They had even forgotten that they were the ones who had initiated the contract negotiations. Now, they were just adding insult to injury. Feng Yi had expected all of this. When he went to fetch them, he was still in his suit, his smile perfect. No matter what stage he was in the business world, he couldn't fall first. He couldn't be the first to fall, because he still had people to take care of. On the other hand, the operations manager of the other party chuckled. CEO Feng, we're all doing business. Tell me, why don't the people you bring understand the relationship between interests? What's the use of disobedient esports players who can't earn money? To be honest, don't you see what you're like now? Your popularity is almost gone, and your operations are even worse. Your main members are all gone. Who can you beat now? To put it bluntly, it's just a useless team that's past its prime. Wouldn't it be better to take this opportunity to get some paint? Feng Yi held a cigarette between his fingers. He glanced at the other party and extinguished the cigarette. He stood up and smiled. Director Li, you're right. My team member has a flaw. He's too conscientious. Compared to you, his bottom line is too high. Boss Li narrowed his eyes and scoffed, shouting at the three figures. Supreme Alliance is past its prime and will be worthless in the future. Feng Yi, why are you still so proud? The three of them left the voice behind them. Once in the car, Feng Yi said, rest for 2 days. Hugging his rabbit, he said, I can take a break. However, the three of them were well aware of the situation. In this situation, Supreme Alliance could only rest. Not only that, but there would also be more backlashes. But at this moment, all the major esports venues and esports clubs had computers. Suddenly, the screen changed. After a second of white screen, a youngster appeared on the screen. He wore a black leather cap on his silver hair. Some of his silver hair was pinned to the back, revealing a handsome face that looked as if it had been kissed by God. He didn't wear a mask on his face. He had a straight nose, distinct black eyes, and a black belt around his neck. It was Bo Jiu. That's right, it was Bo Jiu. The Real Z. She looked different from before. But that wasn't the main point. The main point was that she had appeared at the heart of the struggle. And in such a manner. In an instant. All the major live stream platforms wanted to broadcast this video. There were places that broadcast it. But there was only one that was so anxious that they couldn't cut it and broadcast it. Boss Li, it still isn't working. The huge traffic flow was slipping away, but they couldn't catch it. Boss Li was anxious. Anyone that watched esports would be paying attention to this matter. They actually couldn't broadcast it. Manager Li tugged at his tie, wanting to let him try again. Unexpectedly, the first thing the person in the video said was, the operations manager of a certain platform should be able to see this video. Then I'll be direct. Director Li, other than your company, any other live broadcast platform can broadcast this video of mine. As for why, it's very simple. As an external member of the team that you call outdated, I don't like you. The person who called Boss Li turned back abruptly, his face drained of all color. He was in the operations department. If such a good resource was ruined in his hands, his boss would definitely hold him responsible. But Spade Z hadn't revealed their company's name. In this case, only their internal department would know that they couldn't broadcast this video. They wouldn't even be able to gain any attention from the side. Boss Li's first reaction was to call Feng Yi. That was the only way he could make up for his mistake. However, he didn't expect that Director Feng, who was known as the smiling prince in the industry, would blacklist him. Sure enough, less than 10 seconds after the video was broadcasted, President Li received a call from the higher-ups. What's wrong with you? Is this how the operations department does it? Boss Li wanted to explain. No, I thought Supreme Alliance. You thought. Don't tell me you thought that. If Spade Z's video isn't broadcasted, you can leave. Snap. The sound of the phone being hung up. Bosley sat there with sweat dripping down his forehead. His heart was filled with regret, but it was all too late. But he didn't understand. There wasn't anyone else here. How did Spade Z know what they were talking about? Others didn't understand. To Bojo, it was easy as long as there was a camera. Bosley assumed Supreme Alliance was over, and didn't need to be particular. He hadn't said it in his office. Instead, he had said it outside. Of course there would be a camera. When the news came out, Bojo, who was in America, immediately found a way to get Shui Wu Yao and the others' itineraries. She had wanted to tell them to ignore her and to say whatever was best for her. But after going through the internet, she saw the scene just now. At that time, Hoshino had been sitting behind Bojo. His gaze had landed on the screen. You want to interfere? Teach him a lesson. Bojo's voice was calm but her eyes were dark. Supreme Alliance shouldn't be despised because of her. Besides, the other party didn't have the right to embarrass Supreme Alliance. After that there was this live stream. Her eyes were very dark. She looked straight into the camera. You can ask anything you want in the live stream room until you vent your anger by spamming the bullet screen. Everyone thought that the fans would definitely flood the live stream at this time. But in reality it was exploding. But they had sent diamonds and flowers. They had sent planes and cruises. There was also a picture posted in the live stream room. It was the signature list of almost 1,000 people. There was a sentence written on the front of the list. Our fan, Big Spade, entered the wilderness alone. Her maneuvers are top-notch and her positioning is outstanding. As an esports player, her skills are passable. As an ordinary person, she objected to the unfairness of the game. In the past, we always fantasized about marrying such a person. This handsome youngster, from his talent to his character, as well as that overconfident tone of his voice, we liked everything about him. Her special family forced her to dress as a man. Now, we just want her to know that as long as she doesn't hurt anyone, all her privacy belongs to her. And we will always be Spade fans. On the back, there were many girls' signatures. At the end, there was a huge heart circled. There were people scolding her. They couldn't accept the fact that their idol was a girl. But they hadn't expected the Supreme Alliance to speak up for Spade Z. They hadn't expected the people from Xiongnan to stand up for her. First it was Beauty Luo. I'm so shocked I dropped my mouse. Why is my almighty a girl? She's so cool. I love her even more. Next it was Captain Xiao. She doesn't use substitutes, doesn't imitate others and treats every match seriously. This has nothing to do with gender. Finally, it was Zhao Sanpang. F***CK. You're telling me that I couldn't retaliate because of a girl? I, the #1 tank in the country, am not convinced. Little Spade, hurry up and come back. Master Zhao is going to torture you. Not to mention Rao Rong, who had disappeared ever since that incident. Many people were trying to get him back online. He had only said one sentence but it had blown the internet apart. From today onwards, I will join Supreme Alliance. My game ID will be Supreme Alliance Rao Rong. Return. It wasn't just a return. At this moment, he had joined a team that was in dire straits. Many fans couldn't understand. Almighty Rao, why? Join another team, really, it's so messy, don't join Supreme Alliance. Rao Rong replied, from a personal point of view, I want to repay Spade Z's kindness. From a professional player's point of view, Supreme Alliance is the team I want to join the most. They won't abandon someone just because of a scandal, they are still unyielding. Since Rao Rong was here, how could the other not be here? His tone was serious. I have terminated my contract and will be joining Supreme Alliance. My game ID will be Supreme Alliance's most handsome. The addition of two almighties. It wasn't just the netizens and media that hadn't expected it. Even the experienced Feng Yi paused, unable to believe what he had heard. He turned towards his assistant beside him. What did you say? The assistant continued agitatedly. It's true, Boss Qin sent over their contracts personally. From now on, Almighty Rao and Almighty Rao will be Supreme Alliances. Boss Qin. Feng Yi listened attentively, turning to call Qin Mo. Boss Qin, Rao Rong and Almighty Rao. Qin Mo didn't return to China. He sat in front of his computer, watching the video, his gaze deepening. I just made a call. They joined Supreme Alliance willingly. It wasn't that simple. This was a revival from the dead. Before this, when Shui Yaoyao was at the Zhua family's house, a few girls had come over for a barbecue. Supreme Alliance is past its prime. I think it won't be long before they return to their original state. She deserved it for being so rude to us previously. She thinks she's a god just by playing a game. Hee hee, she's just an ugly duckling. She should look at herself in the mirror. All right, let's just wait for a certain someone to be past her prime. After reading the explosive news, all of them stopped talking. Other than Rao Rong and the others, there was also Yun, who's official Weibo. I'm taking a leave of absence from school. I'll be back in 3 days. I heard that Supreme Alliance can't even beat a provincial team. I'm back. The last 4 words. It was simple. However, it just so happened that countless people who read that message couldn't help but have tears in their eyes, and something violently surged out of their chests. I'm back. What did it mean? Only the fans who had followed them all the way knew. If they hadn't experienced it, they wouldn't have been moved and wouldn't understand the meaning behind it. Everyone was terrified, afraid of getting into trouble. Not only did they not get rid of themselves, but they also gathered from all over the world, returning to the same city. They wanted to tell everyone that Supreme Alliance hadn't fallen. Even if they were to fall into the dust, as long as they were needed, they would be able to fight alongside them. Those who wanted to be tarnished were still tarnished. Those who splashed dirty water were still there. But at this moment, be it Shui Yaoyao, Yin Wu Yao, Coco, or Feng Shang, they weren't thinking about these things. They were thinking about the Asian Cup. They could still play with their teammates. The public opinion wouldn't change. So what? Those who cared were still there. That seemed to be the case. When you didn't experience darkness, you wouldn't realize how gentle the world was. Hoshino watched as the youngster sat in front of the computer, not moving for a long time. He laughed lightly. You want to go back? Mate, Bojo replied, turning her head. But I can't go back. Don't be so sure. Hoshino reached out, placing his palm on her head, rubbing it back and forth. Once you're done here, go back and play a game. Don't forget, you still owe me a duel. Bojo glanced over, wanting to change the topic. Some things were stuck in a deadlock. We can have a duel now. Z. Suddenly, Hoshino lowered his voice. Bojo glanced up, looking at him in confusion. Hoshino looked at her, his eyes as clear as water. That's the real you, sitting beside Qin Mo, waving the mouse recklessly, invading the wilderness to cooperate with that person, smiling brightly, eyes shining brightly. That's the real you, only when you're beside Qin Mo, that's the real you. Treat yourself better, otherwise, how can I be at ease? Chapter 11:28. Before Bojo could react, Hoshino reached for his jacket, his tone changing. Should we change our method of tracking the culprit of the maiden's sacrifice? I bought some information on the 5th Avenue before coming. All right. Bojo had long sensed that something was amiss. It seemed like a simple gathering of people with bad values, but in reality, the consequences were getting worse and worse. This serial suicide case involved hypnosis. Fan Jia wouldn't be able to do it alone. Before she left, Bojo paused, glancing at the phone that was switched off. In the end, she walked to the phone booth downstairs and made an international call. The person on the other end picked up quickly, probably because it wasn't a domestic number. Hello, Joe? Is this Joe? The signal wasn't good and the call was intermittent. But she could still recognize He Honghua's voice. Bojo knew that He Honghua would be worried after such a huge incident. There were many times when she couldn't just leave like that because she was the one in charge of this body. She also knew how much the mother loved her daughter. Whenever she faced He Honghua, Bojo would always feel guilty. She didn't know how to tell He Honghua that the child she had missed so much was no longer around. If Bojo had wanted to tell He Honghua everything from the bottom of her heart, after hearing He Honghua's tone, she dispelled the thought. It's me. Bojo knew that in order to make someone happy, she had to come up with countless lies. She hated lying the most, but this was the most she had ever lied to He Honghua. Madam He, don't worry, I'm fine. I'm doing well in America. My phone fell into the water during filming and the call malfunctioned. After hearing this, He Honghua hesitated for a long time before saying, Joe, why don't we stop playing games? He Honghua wasn't someone who cared about what others said. Bo Jiu knew this better than anyone else. She came from a village, and because of her background, no matter what she did, even if her husband was stolen, people would blame her. She had a loud voice like a country bumpkin. But even so, she did not admit defeat. Others said that she had no qualities and could not do anything, so she could not be a shareholder of Fu's enterprise. No one thought about it. The Fu family's startup capital was hers, so she had every right to do it. After being chased out, how many times had he been slandered? It could be said that everything Bo Jiu had suffered wasn't even a tenth of her mother's. After all, from a certain perspective, Bo Jiu wasn't at a disadvantage. But what could He Honghua have at that time? Some people used true love as an excuse to plunder, thinking that Fu Zhongyi and Su Mei should be together. He Honghua was just a village girl. She should go back to where she came from. Even if it came to that. He Honghua gritted her teeth and persevered. To make such a person say, Joe, why don't we stop playing games? One could imagine how she was feeling right now. There were some things that He Honghua did not understand. Her age was there for all to see. She didn't want her daughter to bear the blame. If you want to scold someone, you can scold her. In fact, every mother's mood was the same. As long as their child was well, it was fine. To a mother, it didn't matter how many times she was cut. But if the knife cut the child, it would be a pain that would cause her to sleep. Bo Jiu listened to the pleading voice. She held onto the phone and paused for a moment before replying, All right, I won't play games. Even those who weren't afraid of rumors had their weaknesses. And Bo Jiu's weakness was probably He Honghua. There were many times when we asked ourselves why we didn't become bad people. After all, in this world, there were too many people who took over other people's things. As long as they acted pitifully, there would be a bunch of people who would support them. As for those who were dutiful and persevered in their passionate careers, they couldn't even take back what belonged to them. The cost of being a bad person was too low, so low that it was negligible. But as an ordinary person, they would always be bound by something called conscience. When Bo Jiu hung up, Hoshino was standing outside the phone booth. He glanced up and glanced at her, frowning. Just to report that I'm safe. Bo Jiu didn't explain the details of the call. Her emotions didn't seem to be affected. But there was one sentence that Qin Mo didn't say casually. He had joined the esports industry because he liked someone who liked to play games. As Bo Jiu herself, she liked the feeling of fighting alongside the other members of the Supreme Alliance. But every time they gave up on something they liked, it was definitely because of their weaknesses. If Bo Jiu appeared in front of others, they wouldn't be able to tell anything. But Hoshino wasn't just anyone. From that back view, he could clearly see the word desolate. But that feeling disappeared quickly. After a turn and entering the sports car, Bo Jiu turned back into Z, the young lord of the hacker world, who could take on everything. She turned the steering wheel with one hand and tapped on the GPS. After confirming the route, she drove out of the main road. She drove at a high speed. But she avoided all the cars perfectly. When she brushed past the cars, the sound of the wind could still be heard. In China, many people were waiting for Spade Z's reply. After all, the direction of the public opinion had changed. But no matter how many messages they left, Spade Z seemed to have disappeared. Even Lin Feng realized a problem. He really couldn't contact Little Spade. It wasn't that he didn't receive his call, but that number seemed to have been automatically discarded. When the incident had happened, Lin Feng had been trying to contact Bo Jiu. Even the news of Yun Hu's return had only been known after he had reached home and opened his official Weibo. His fans had tagged him. Lin Feng stilled. He gripped the mouse in his hand. He hadn't had the time to remove his suit, so he froze in front of the computer screen in a daze. It was probably because he hadn't expected Yun Hu to return so quickly. It had only been a day. Sometimes, he couldn't help but think about what kind of life he would have in the future. One of his plans was to fly over to see Yun Hu when they met again. He must have thought too highly of himself. Even if he wanted to see him, he wouldn't let him know. Lin Feng couldn't stand the scene of them exchanging pleasantries when they had nothing to say. especially between the two of them. Besides, other than Yun-Hu, there must be someone else standing beside him. Once he thought about this, Lin Feng felt that no matter how powerful his imagination was, he shouldn't fly over. After all, Yun-Hu had started his new life. But today, he actually said he was coming back. Of course, Lin Feng was in a daze. After a while, he grabbed his wallet and headed to the team to take a look. The moment he reached the ground floor, he bumped into Yun-Hu's mother. The Lin family had moved out of the courtyard. It was obvious that there was a reason for Madame Yun to make such a trip. In the living room, she held a cup of tea from her good friend, Madame Yun, and shook her head. I don't know what to say about Yun-Hu. He has been planning to study abroad for so long. In order to get the only spot in the school, he has been working hard ever since he was a freshman. He would often look for me to discuss some problems. It wasn't easy for him to finally get the spot, but right before the plane took off, he called my phone and told me in a tone that I had never heard before that he didn't want to study abroad anymore. He would apply for a leave of absence this time. I thought he was just joking, but I never expected him to really. Lady Yun couldn't say anything else after that. Her son had never caused any trouble since he was young. He was so outstanding that she didn't have to worry about him. Mrs. Yun had never expected Yun-Hu to make such a huge decision on his own. What's more, he had made the decision to leave school. Before Yun-Hu left, she had specially informed her friends there. Since he was teaching at that university, he would definitely be of help to her son's future development. No one could understand her feelings. When she called her son to ask if he had settled down, she was surprised. However, this was the answer he got. Don't you think it's ridiculous? He actually came back just to play games. Mother Lin sat opposite her. Actually, sometimes I feel that we are too cruel. We always think from our own point of view that this is the most useful thing for our child's future. However, we forget to ask what exactly they like. Now, Lin Feng is running projects twice as many as the club. On the surface, it doesn't look like anything, but I know very well that compared to business, this kid still likes to play games the most. Hence, I plan to let me handle the company's matters during this period of time. At least for the next 3 years, I'll let him do what he likes. When Madame Yun heard this, she seemed to have thought it through. She brought it over and smiled. You're right. When we were young, we even promised that when we get married and have children, we'll let him do what he likes. I forgot about it. But these two really like to play games. Do you still remember when they were young, each holding a game controller and sitting on the floor? Because they were too tired, they would lean their heads against each other and fall asleep just like that? I remember, of course I remember. Madame Lin shook her head. On second thought, so many years have passed. These two still haven't changed. Isn't that so? Madame Yun was still thinking about something. When Madame Lin saw this, she poured another cup of tea for her. The school's quota is limited. If you miss it this time, no one knows if there will be a next time. Seeing that you're in such a bad mood, let me tell you something to calm you down. What is it? Madame Yun was curious. Madame Lin leaned over and said, Yesterday when Hu left, my silly son cried. At that time, you were busy with other things, so you didn't see him like that. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.